Chapter 2856. If he ran out of materials, he could accumulate more. However, opportunities were fleeting. If he didn't seize the opportunity, it would be impossible to rescue the Dragon Sparrow King and the Fire Phoenix King, and leave the Dark Abyss. Night Sorrow thought for a moment, and felt that if he set up the Heaven and Earth Concealment Array, and hid the teleportation formation within his own array, he would have complete control of the situation. He wouldn't have to worry about the three sovereigns chasing after him not giving up, unless they wanted to fight the various sovereigns of the Dark Abyss. However, that was obviously impossible. Night Sorrow knew that the Dark Moon Ruler, the All-Heaven Ruler, and the Illustrious Ruler didn't have such courage. They only cared about their own interests. They wouldn't fight the sovereigns of the Dark Abyss under such circumstances. Heaven and Earth Concealment Array, activate. After deciding to set up the array, Night Sorrow immediately got to work. Very quickly, he activated the power of Heaven and Earth within 100,000 miles, and set up the Heaven and Earth Concealment Array. After the array was set up, the area within 100,000 miles was completely under Night Sorrow's control. Under his control, the appearance of the area quickly changed. The forest was gone, replaced by a boundless ocean. Even the aura of the array set up by the three sovereigns had been sealed. Not good. The array's location has changed. I can no longer sense its existence. When Night Sorrow used the Heaven and Earth Concealment Array to conceal the aura of the three sovereigns, the Illustrious Ruler immediately realized that something was wrong. What? Could it be that we've been lured away? The Dark Moon Ruler also realized what was going on. As for the All-Heaven Ruler, when he realized what was going on, he immediately flew towards the teleportation formation. However, when he arrived near the formation, he was immediately stunned by the scene before him. The forest in his impression was gone, replaced by a vast ocean. It looked completely boundless. What's going on? The All-Heaven Ruler almost went crazy when he saw the ocean in front of him. One of the miraculous effects of the Heaven and Earth Concealment Array was that it could hide the teleportation formation in the void and change the terrain at will. I'm afraid that Night Sorrow set up an extremely profound array here. Although the hegemon didn't panic, his expression was unsightly. All this while, she had never thought much of Night Sorrow. She felt that he was just a slightly more talented divine lord who could defeat some divine king. This was a legendary achievement in the god realm. But against a sovereign like her, it was no threat at all. But now, when she saw the landscape in front of her and used her spiritual energy to investigate, she instantly discovered that everything was different. She could no longer detect the existence of the teleportation formation. This meant that if the three of them wanted to leave the Dark Abyss, they had to go through Night Sorrow. They had completely fallen into a passive position. Damn it, we should have left one of us behind to guard the teleportation array. What should we do now? The Dark Moon Ruler's face was dark and gloomy. The three of them had hoped to find Night Sorrow as soon as possible, but they hadn't imagined that they would fall for such a simple trick. This shouldn't have happened. But when he thought about it, under the circumstances at that time, who would be willing to stay here? It was Night Sorrow who knew exactly what they were thinking. What should we do? I think we should attack first before doing anything else. The Overlord of all heaven said irritably as he prepared to attack the ocean. By now, they had already killed two of Hegemon Moxie's subordinates, the Divine King. If they didn't respond, they would quickly be discovered. Once Hegemon Moxie discovered them, it would be the same as all five sovereigns of the Dark Abyss discovering them. If they still couldn't leave by then, the consequences would be unimaginable. It was very likely that all three of them would die in battle here. No, we can't attack. If you personally destroy the teleportation array, we'll lose our chance to leave. Although the Dark Moon Ruler was similarly agitated, he didn't lose control. Instead, he shouted towards the boundless ocean. Night Sorrow, I know that you set up this array. Come out and talk. You three sovereigns really do think highly of me. You actually joined forces and chased me all the way here. Night Sorrow's figure slowly rose from the depths of the ocean to the surface. He stood atop the waves and stared at the three sovereigns. He didn't mention the Blazing Phoenix King and the Dragon Sparrow King, as that would put him in a passive position. Upon hearing Night Sorrow's words, the Overlord smiled indifferently. Night Sorrow, you are very outstanding. Against the three of us, even an ordinary divine king would feel despair. I admire you for being able to find a way to counterattack as a divine sovereign. Tell me, what will it take for us to leave the dark abyss through the teleportation array you control? The problem isn't what I want, but what you'll give me. If I didn't want you to bleed a little, I would have left long ago. Night Sorrow laughed coldly, tossing aside the blazing Phoenix King and the Dragon Sparrow King. These words made the Overlord, the Dark Moon ruler, and the Overlord of all heaven realize just how serious the situation was. The current situation was exactly as Night Sorrow had said. If he wanted to, he could leave at any time. As for the three of them, tragedy would definitely befall them. You can ask for it yourself. As long as you want it, as long as I can do it. The Overlord had a smile on his face. However, this smile looked like the smile of a greedy wolf. What do the two of you think? Night Sorrow didn't speak immediately. Instead, he looked at the Dark Moon ruler and the Overlord of all heaven. I think we should capture you first before we talk about anything else. While the Dark Moon ruler was deep in thought, the Overlord of all heaven made his move. After all, he had the strength of a ruler. In a flash, he appeared behind Night Sorrow and used his god domain to seal off all possible escape routes. At the same time, the Overlord of all heaven grabbed at Night Sorrow in an attempt to take him under his control. All heaven, I think you don't want to leave. After all heaven made his move, Night Sorrow didn't move at all. After all, he was just a shadow on the wave. After one of Luo Tian's shadows was destroyed, Yishang's figure once again appeared on another wave 10,000 meters away. He said coldly, I have two requests. As long as the Dark Moon ruler and Dark Moon ruler can fulfill them, I will agree to let you go. What requests? The Dark Moon ruler and Dark Moon ruler asked immediately. Although the two of them were usually high and mighty rulers, they were currently in a passive position. They didn't have the right to be arrogant, so their attitudes weren't bad. If the two of you kill all heaven, I will let you go. I won't pursue the matter of you trying to kill me and steal my treasures. Chapter 2857. Night Sorrow didn't mention the Dragon Sparrow Monarch and the Fire Phoenix Monarch, but he hadn't forgotten about them. Bastard. Do you think an ant like you can sow discord between the three of us rulers? The Great Lord of all heaven roared furiously when he heard Night Sorrow. However, he was clearly feeling guilty and immediately put his guard up against the illustrious ruler and the Dark Moon ruler. The illustrious ruler and the Dark Moon ruler, who had heard Night Sorrow's words, fell silent. Clearly, they were communicating telepathically. You two, don't tell me you're really going to listen to this ant. The All-Heaven ruler grew anxious when he saw the illustrious ruler and the Dark Moon ruler discussing telepathically. At that moment, the illustrious ruler looked at Night Sorrow and sneered. We agree to your request. Let's kill Luo Tian, and we'll forget about this matter. Although the Dark Moon ruler didn't say anything, his gaze was fixed on the All-Heaven ruler. He was clearly prepared to attack. The current situation was extremely dangerous for him and the illustrious ruler. If the Dark Abyss ruler arrived, things would become even more difficult. After all, Night Sorrow held the initiative. If he insisted on playing hard, they would all be left in the Dark Abyss. Illustrious ruler Dark Moon, you two are going back on your word. If you attack, all heaven will summon the Dark Abyss ruler even if it costs my life. At worst, we'll all die together. As all heaven spoke, he continuously studied the array before him. However, he couldn't figure anything out. In fact, he wasn't the only one. How could the illustrious ruler and the Dark Moon ruler give up so easily? However, they were completely stumped by the array and had no way of breaking it. The heaven and earth concealment formation was simply too profound. Although the sovereigns were powerful, they were helpless against it. All heaven, I'm afraid you don't have the strength to do so. The illustrious ruler's eyes flashed coldly as he immediately attacked the all-heaven ruler. You're courting death. Don't think that I'm afraid of you. All heaven roared when he saw the illustrious ruler attack. He wanted the Dark Abyss ruler to hear him. Dark Moon, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and cooperate with me. When he saw the all-heaven ruler's reaction, the illustrious Hegemon said coldly. Towards Luo Tian, she did not have the slightest bit of pity. Good. Let's go, let's go. Hegemon Dark Moon let out a sigh, then attacked Hegemon All Heaven as well. After being suppressed by the two of them, Luo Tian flew into a rage and roared non-stop. Fighting 1 against 2, he had no chance of winning. And at this time, the ruler of the Dark Abyss hadn't arrived yet. Bastards, you're forcing this sovereign to go all out. The great sovereign of all heaven, who was being suppressed by the two great races, was completely enraged. He was already forced to use his ultimate technique. However, right at this moment, Night Sorrow spoke abruptly. Alright, stop. I suddenly felt that killing the ruler of the God world in the Dark Abyss would be detrimental to the God world. Dark Abyss, a sovereign is coming. If you three can kill it, I'll let you go. Furthermore, I will let bygones be bygones. You actually decided to let me go? The All-Heaven ruler, who had been prepared to fight to the death, was stunned when he heard Night Sorrow's words. What are you confused about? I never wanted to kill you in the first place. I just wanted to teach you a lesson. If you dare attack me again, I'll kill you. Night Sorrow coldly threatened, then looked at the three sovereigns and said, Lord Moxie of the Dark Abyss is already nearby, but he can't see us. In truth, he had ordered Xian He and Dark Moon to attack All Heaven for 2 reasons. First, he wanted to teach All Heaven a lesson, and second, he wanted to test Hegemon Dazzling. Night Sorrow was suspicious of Hegemon Dazzling. He suspected that she didn't have any feelings for the God world. When he had ordered the two of them to attack All Heaven, Xian He had indeed chosen to attack without hesitation. Moreover, there was a hint of smugness in his eyes. This proved many things. When Night Sorrow spoke, the 3 sovereigns looked in the direction he was pointing and were completely stunned. They had already seen Hegemon Moxie's figure, but he hadn't noticed them at all. What kind of technique is this? Dazzling Hegemon found it hard to believe that Hegemon Moxie hadn't noticed them at all. However, when he thought about it, they weren't sure where Night Sorrow was either. Hegemon Darkmoon's expression was similarly unsightly. They now understood how terrifying Night Sorrow's formation was. What are you hesitating for? There's only one Lord of Darkness nearby. Kill him immediately. Consider it your contribution to the God world. Otherwise, I won't let you leave. The Hegemon of Illustrious Hegemon and the Dark Moon Hegemon were both stunned by Night Sorrow's world-concealing formation. Fine. Kill him. Consider it our contribution to the God world. As for All Heaven, who was sweating profusely, he didn't hesitate to attack Hegemon Moxie. Under Night Sorrow's control, the space around them was completely under their control. Surprisingly, All Heaven's attack appeared right in front of Hegemon Moxie. Where did this midget come from? How dare you ambush me? Hegemon Moxie of the Dark Abyss was shocked when he saw All Heaven's Hegemon. Then he ferociously attacked. However, at the same time, he realized that he was being ambushed by a Hegemon of the God world. Wretch, who are you calling a midget? You're courting death. All Heaven, who had been the first to attack, was enraged when he was called a midget. He was even angrier than when he had been attacked by Dazzling Hegemon and Dark Moon. As for Hegemon Dark Moon, he glanced at Dazzling Hegemon, then at Night Sorrow. You're the virtuous sovereign. I hope you keep your word. Don't change your mind. We're Hegemons with dignity. We're not monkeys to be toyed with. As long as you cooperate with me to kill Hegemon Moxie, I'll definitely release you. Hegemon Tianai and Hegemon Clearsound, who are waiting outside, won't attack you. Night Sorrow hadn't planned on killing All Heaven at all, which was why he had called for them to stop midway. He wasn't toying with them. Right now, he really did want the 3 Hegemons to cooperate with him to kill Hegemon Moxie. If they could kill him, Night Sorrow would definitely obtain a huge amount of virtuous virtue. That would be a huge gain. Its value couldn't be quantified. It was very likely that Night Sorrow would be able to control the laws of Hegemons, while still in the Divine King realm. He would be able to fight Hegemons as a Divine King. Chapter 2858. Hegemon Moxie had no idea that he had already entered Night Sorrow's Heaven and Earth Concealment formation. Night Sorrow had already taken complete control of the surrounding landscape, and could change it at will. There was no way he could escape. After exchanging a blow with the Overlord of All Heaven, Hegemon Moxie quickly discovered the Overlord of All Heaven, and the Overlord of the Dark Moon. He also discovered the existence of Night Sorrow and Tianyin Bao, 3 hegemons and a divine sovereign who can control a hegemon artifact. This is a large-scale sneak attack from the God realm. After confirming this, Hegemon Moxie immediately used a secret technique to send a message to the other hegemons of the Dark Abyss. His secret technique was soundless and formless, but the Heaven and Earth Concealment Formation was still able to block it. However, Night Sorrow ordered him to spread the news. Within the Heaven and Earth Concealment Formation, he and the other 3 hegemons worked together to kill a hegemon. Even if the other hegemons of the Dark Abyss came together, he would be able to separate them and kill them one by one. That was, unless one of the Divine Kings was a hegemon in the Tao of Formations. Die. Call me a midget. See if I don't turn you into a midget. As soon as Hegemon Moxie sent out the signal for help, the Overlord of all Heaven, who had been in a bad mood this entire time, exploded and attacked him over and over again. All Heaven was much more frenzied than the others. It was almost as if he was using Hegemon Moxie as a punching bag. You're trying to start a large-scale war between the 2 sides. Don't think that the Dark Abyss doesn't have a teleportation formation to the God realm. Although Hegemon Moxie was fairly strong, he was outnumbered and outgunned. He was constantly at a disadvantage. In addition, he wanted to flee, but he didn't understand the laws contained within the Heaven and Earth Concealment Formation. So what if a war breaks out? Once you're killed, the Dark Abyss will only have 4 hegemons left. The God realm has 10 or so. You're no match for us. Die. Now that things had developed to this point, the Overlord of the Dark Moon temporarily gave up on trying to kill Night Sorrow and Tianyin Bao. He had already realized how special the formation Night Sorrow had set up was. If even the hegemons of the Dark Abyss couldn't escape, then they probably couldn't as well. After all, their understanding of formations wasn't all that outstanding. If they wanted to break the Heaven and Earth Concealment Formation, they would have to be a top-tier formation master of the Heavens and Earth Concealment Formation. Moxie was the Overlord of the Heavens and Earth Realm Concealment Formation. Blindly confident people, you still don't know how powerful Sovereign Luan Mia of the Dark Abyss is. What awaits you shall's night destruction. Moxie. Hegemon Moxie's face was filled with reluctance, but in the face of the combined attacks of 3 hegemons and Night Sorrow, he was completely powerless to resist. Moxie Madamain Heaven, Heaven's wills Heaven's night heave. S night, S was heave Heaven. Hegemon illustrious Hegemon Dark Moon, and Hegemon All Heaven weren't particularly strong, but they were definitely the most sinister and cunning of them all. They had planned everything out for Hegemon Moxie. There's no need for you to point fingers at us. No matter how strong your Hegemon Luan Mia is, there are others in the God realm who can contend against him. As long as there are no autarchs, the Dark Abyss is no match for the God realm. Luo Tian's face grew crazier and crazier. In truth, his heart was extremely dark. After being mocked, he exploded with rage, causing even Night Sorrow and the others to feel a hint of fear. Moxie couldn't hold on any longer. He'd been waiting for Hegemon Luan Mia to arrive. In the hearts of the Dark Abyss, Luan Mia had suddenly risen to power. He was far stronger than any hegemon in the past, and many suspected that he was the reincarnation of an autarch. Hegemon Luan Mia, avenge me. Realizing that he had no power to resist, Moxie immediately considered self-detonating. The self-detonation of a hegemon was many times more powerful than any hegemon's attack. Even the Heaven and Earth Concealment Formation would be greatly affected. Don't give him a chance to self-detonate. If he succeeds, he'll lose a large amount of hegemonic laws. Seeing that Moxie was about to self-detonate, Hegemon Dark Moon immediately spoke up. Hegemonic laws were extremely valuable, and they could even be used to raise a hegemon. They were just as valuable as a hegemon artifact. Moxie's self-detonation might be able to destroy the Heaven and Earth Concealment Formation, but none of the 3 hegemons, including Hegemon Luan Mia, wanted him to lose even a sliver of hegemonic laws. All 3 of them used their most powerful techniques. Hegemon Luan Mia even used a secret art to seal Moxie's soul in ice, causing him to instantly lose some of his will. To ordinary cultivators, this brief moment was nothing. However, to the hegemons, it was an excellent opportunity. Hegemon Darkmoon and Hegemon Luanmia both used their most powerful techniques to deal a fatal blow to Moxie. 5 Elements Arrow Formation. In this situation, Night Sorrow also saw an opportunity. He began to use the 33 Heavens secret combat art. Using his strongest attack, the 5-element arrow formation. Just as Moxie was about to be killed, the 5 elements arrow formation landed viciously on his body. Boom. Moxie, who had already lost all ability to defend himself, disintegrated under their attacks. He transformed into a large amount of hegemonic laws and essence. Good stuff. I won't stand on ceremony. Hegemon Luanmia's face lit up with delight when he saw Moxie transform into a large amount of hegemonic laws and essence. Hegemon Darkmoon and Hegemon Luanmia also began to loot the hegemons. Killing a hegemon was an extremely rare occurrence. Although it was very likely that they wouldn't be able to obtain a hegemon artifact, they were still very satisfied with what they had just gained. Although I won't be able to obtain all of the hegemonic laws and essence, with the help of the Heaven and Earth Concealment Formation, I'll be able to obtain at least half. I can't even begin to imagine what I'll gain. As the 3 hegemons began to loot the hegemonic laws and essence, Night Sorrow did the same. However, it seemed that his gains weren't even a fraction of what the 3 hegemons were gaining. The 3 hegemons couldn't help but laugh in their hearts. However, Night Sorrow had long since taken control of the Heaven and Earth Concealment Formation, and secretly transferred the hegemonic laws and essence away. By now, the 4 hegemons of the Dark Abyss had already arrived. You deserve to die. One day, this hegemon will slaughter his way to the God world and destroy you all. Hegemon Luanmia, the leader of the Dark Abyss, immediately roared when he realized that Moxie had already been killed. Chapter 2859. The other hegemons of the Darkness Abyss were well aware of Hegemon Luanmia's abilities. Since even he had stopped, the other hegemons immediately stopped and stood behind him. Night Sorrow, who was within the Heaven and Earth Concealment Formation, saw the appearance of one of the green-furred hegemons and immediately recalled some matters of the past. This green-furred hegemon had once crossed half his body into the God world, and caused quite a stir. He immediately transmitted, "I'll settle this matter with you in the future." Who do you think you are? A divine lord dares to spout such nonsense in front of so many hegemons. I'll make you understand what it means to not offend a hegemon. The green-furred hegemon was immediately enraged by this warning. As he saw it, divine lords were ant-like existences who had no right to speak to him. Remember, there will be a battle between us. Night Sorrow had an extremely deep impression of this green-furred hegemon. If not for the fact that he had only been able to cross a small portion of the God world and couldn't unleash his true strength, Night Sorrow probably would have been killed. Now that they were meeting again, he immediately issued a challenge. The green-furred hegemon laughed sinisterly. "Kiki, if you have the ability, let's fight right now. Do you dare come out?" He knew that he couldn't enter Night Sorrow's current location. "Don't worry, it won't be too long before our battle." The moment he saw the green-furred hegemon, Night Sorrow knew that he had to fight him before leaving and completely resolve this matter. "I'll be waiting for you." The green-furred hegemon snorted and said no more. The Dark Moon hegemon said, "Should we leave?" Let's go. There's no need to get entangled with them." The hegemon thought for a moment, then nodded. Given the current situation, the best choice for her was to leave immediately. After replying to the Dark Moon hegemon, the hegemon turned to Night Sorrow and said, "Let's make a deal. Today's matter is written off. What do you think? In any case, no one lost out, so let's write it off. However, you have to release my 2 subordinates. Also, you have to promise that you won't attack us for the time being." Night Sorrow looked over at the Sovereign Lord, asking for the Dragonfinch King and Flamingo King. It was his intention to keep the matter under wraps until now and speak of it casually. On the other hand, he wasn't sure whether or not Hegemon Tianai and Hegemon Clearsound were outside. If the 3 of them were outside and immediately turned hostile, things would become very difficult. "Alright, I Xuanha, agree to your request." Under these circumstances, although the mighty sovereign knew that the 2 divine king were important to Night Sorrow, she had already plundered quite a bit of the sovereign's laws and essence. She needed to return to her territory to absorb them, so she didn't bother too much. Hearing this, he released Dragon Sparrow King and Fire Phoenix King and promised not to attack Night Sorrow and the others for the time being. I, the Dark Moon, also agree to your request. The Dark Moon ruler, who had also benefited from this, was in a good mood. He didn't dwell on this matter for too long, and he immediately swore an oath to the Tao of the Heavens. As for Luo Tian, he didn't waste any words either. Afterwards, the two sovereigns cooperated with the mighty sovereign to deactivate the formation they'd set up. Together with Night Sorrow, they stepped onto the teleportation formation. Activating the teleportation formation required quite a few divine crystals, but none of the people present were poor. They didn't haggle over this matter. Activate the power of the Dark Abyss and seal everything within 300,000 miles. After Night Sorrow and the others left, Hegemon Wanmia ordered the Dark Abyss ruler and the Divine King to cooperate with him and seal off Night Sorrow's Heaven and Earth concealment formation. At the same time, he said to the green-furred Hegemon, "Also go take a look and see if the teleportation formations we set up can be used normally. If they can, I'm prepared to go to the God world and slaughter them all. Hegemon Moxie can't die in vain." Understood. Lord Wanmia. Upon receiving this order, the green-furred Hegemon immediately went to investigate the teleportation formations and summoning formations they'd set up. These formations were connected to the ones in the Immortal Dominion. If Hegemon Wanmia and the others were to descend, the Immortal Dominion would be unable to withstand the pressure. At the same time, Night Sorrow and the other three sovereigns had successfully returned. To Night Sorrow's delight, Hegemon Tianai and Hegemon Clearsound were already waiting for him when he and the other three sovereigns teleported back to Nine Heaven Shrine. Upon seeing Night Sorrow appear with the other sovereigns, Hegemon Dark Moon, and Overlord Luo Tian, Tianya's expression changed drastically. Hegemon Tianya's expression instantly changed. He snorted coldly and said, "How dare you? I already said that Hegemons aren't allowed to attack Nightfall. What are you doing now?" Hegemon Tianai, "We know that you've taken great care of Night Sorrow, but there has to be a reason for everything. Look, isn't Night Sorrow standing there completely unharmed? If we really wanted to attack him, would he still be in this state?" Hegemon Tianai immediately laughed when he saw Hegemon Tianya's anger. "Night Sorrow, what's going on here?" Hegemon Tianya's expression was extremely grim. He knew that Night Sorrow wasn't the type to speak without thinking. For him and Hegemon Clearsound to be summoned here, there had to be something going on. At the start, they really did try to steal my sovereign artifact. However, once we arrived at the Darkness Abyss, we were forced to work together. We even managed to kill one of the Darkness Sovereigns. Night Sorrow gave a simple description of what had happened. He didn't exaggerate at all. Hegemon Tianai, Hegemon Dark Moon, and Overlord Luo Tian couldn't help but feel nervous. Hegemon Wanmia was the absolute ruler of the Darkness Abyss. Hegemon Tianai was the undisputed #1 expert of the God world. All three of them felt fear in their hearts. In addition, Hegemon Tianai was currently holding the Sky-Split Tower in his hands. He was definitely different from Night Sorrow when controlling his sovereign artifact. If he and Hegemon Clearsound attacked at the same time, not even the three of them would be able to stop them. After hearing Night Sorrow's words, Hegemon Tianai paused for a moment, then said, "No matter what I say, it's wrong for you Hegemons to shamelessly attack a single divine sovereign. How about this? Give half of the purified sovereign edicts each of you obtained to Night Sorrow. That'll be the end of this matter." "What? Give half? Isn't that a bit too much?" Hegemon All Heaven muttered unhappily upon hearing Hegemon Tianya's words. "Shut up." Hegemon Dark Moon immediately rebuked All Heaven. Afraid that Hegemon Tianai would be angered, he smiled and said, "I'm willing to share my spoils." Chapter 2860. Seeing how cooperative the Dark Moon Hegemon was, Hegemon Tianai didn't say anything. He simply nodded, indicating that he could leave. As he left, Hegemon Tianai didn't warn him of anything. Hegemon Tianai forced out a smile and said, "I'm willing to give you half as well." He then reluctantly handed over half of his spoils to Night Sorrow. Since both of them had made such a choice, The all-heaven hegemon naturally wouldn't say anything more. He obediently handed over half of his spoils. After receiving the hegemon's laws and essence, Night Sorrow now possessed roughly 75% of hegemon Moxie's laws and purifications. This sort of harvest was simply astonishing. What's going on? Just as Night Sorrow was about to thank hegemon Tianai and hegemon Voiceless, suddenly, a large amount of karmic energy descended from the skies, as well as a bit of origin energy. Night Sorrow didn't even have time to react before this pure energy burrowed into his body. This should be your reward for killing the hegemon of the darkness abyss. Hegemon Voiceless, who had remained silent this entire time, suddenly laughed. Not only had she and hegemon Tianai hurried over, they had come in person. This was an enormous amount of face. Thank you for dispelling my doubts, hegemon Voiceless. As soon as hegemon Voiceless finished speaking, Night Sorrow realized that this was a reward from the heavenly Tao. There was a bit of a delay in receiving karmic energy, but the purity of the energy was quite good. He didn't lose out at all. After thanking hegemon Clearsound, Night Sorrow immediately split the essences and edicts he had obtained from the 3 hegemons into 2 portions, and gave them to hegemon Tianai and hegemon Clearsound. He said, "Actually, I've already obtained enough essences and edicts. Night Sorrow has no way of repaying the 2 of you for taking care of me. This is all I can do to express my gratitude." "No need. I don't need this." As soon as Night Sorrow handed them over, hegemon Tianai immediately refused. He said, "I took care of you because I see you as a junior and as a friend. There's no need for this." Hegemon Voiceless chuckled. "Keep this. Once you reach the Divine King, absorb it. It'll allow you to quickly increase your strength and improve your understanding of the hegemon level. If nothing unexpected happens, you'll become the 8th hegemon of the God realm. The 2 of you have taken such good care of Night Sorrow." Night Sorrow wasn't normally a quiet person, but in the face of hegemon Tianai and hegemon Voiceless, he really didn't know how to express his thanks. "Ha! Night Sorrow, you don't have to do this at all. Helping the younger generation is something that sovereigns should do. I'm sure you'll be able to join us soon." Hegemon Tianai laughed, then continued, "If I'm not mistaken, you will soon break through to the Divine King level. Given your foundation, as long as you break through to the Divine King level, you'll have a chance to contend against a hegemon. Hegemon Clearsound and I will fully support you in breaking through to the Divine King level as soon as possible. Yes. If you need anything, you can tell us." Hegemon Voiceless replied in an equally magnanimous manner. Night Sorrow thought for a moment and said, "Speaking of needs, I don't have any. However, my family needs some materials to set up a heaven and earth concealment array. That way, they will be able to stay away from danger. I'm worried that someone will use my family to threaten me into handing over the hegemon artifact." "Your worries aren't without reason. What materials do you need? Tell us." Hegemon Tianai said magnanimously. He was the #1 expert of the deity realm. He definitely had far more resources than Night Sorrow. "I need." Yishan opened his mouth and listed a few materials that he lacked. He hadn't expected that hegemon Tianai and hegemon Voiceless would be able to come up with all the materials he needed. These materials are extremely important to Night Sorrow. There's no way I can accept Night Sorrow's generosity for nothing. Here are the quintessence and laws of the hegemons just now. The 2 of you must accept them. Otherwise, I'll feel really bad about it. Night Sorrow knew about these materials, and how hard they were to come by. He had no intention of accepting them for nothing. Hegemon Tianai and hegemon Voiceless truly couldn't refuse. They accepted Night Sorrow's gift in return. Afterwards, hegemon Tianai and hegemon Voiceless followed Night Sorrow to the deathless divine realm. Night Sorrow was now completely at ease with the 2 of them. He took them to see his family. Upon seeing the 2 hegemons, Night Moon's members were all rather excited. After all, these 2 were major figures who stood at the very peak of the deity realm. After properly entertaining the 2 hegemons, Night Sorrow led them to the teleportation formation and summoning formation beneath the deathless divine realm. He told them about his worries, about the dark hegemons entering the deity realm from there. If they came to the God world from here, the immortal domain would be destroyed. That's a problem. At first, I didn't think it would be too dangerous, and wanted to leave it for you to practice. But now, it seems that I'll have to set up some formations. At the very least, I'll know immediately if a hegemon descends. Hegemon T and I observed the formation for a moment, then began to set it up. Night Sorrow and Hegemon Voiceless also left behind their own formation runes. Then the three of them left together. Night Sorrow sent Hegemon T and I and Hegemon Voiceless away, then returned to the Domain Chief's manor, and began to set up the Heaven and Earth Concealment Formation. Once he was done, he breathed a sigh of relief. He then gathered everyone from Night Moon's dynasty and announced, "I'll be going into seclusion to break through to the Divine King level. I won't come out until I reach the Divine King level." "What? You're going to break through to the Divine King level so soon?" No one from the Yi clan was surprised to hear Night Sorrow's decision, but the Divine King Jin Ye sighed in disbelief. "Yes. My virtuous energy has already reached the Divine King level, and the energy I need isn't a problem. It's only a matter of time," Night Sorrow explained to the Divine King Jin Ye, then continued, "While I'm in seclusion, everyone in the Deathless Divine Realm is to return to the Domain Chief's manor. Try not to go out. I'm afraid a great storm is about to descend upon the Deathless Divine Realm today." "All right. We understand," everyone answered one after another. Although they didn't know what the storm Night Sorrow was talking about was, they knew that they were powerless to resist it. Night Sorrow looked at Long Tianqing, Divine Lord Jinyuan, Mo Yuqian, and the others. "I've already obtained the recipe for the Heavenly 1000 Transformations pill. I'll refine it before I go into seclusion so that everyone can recover completely." "Night Sorrow, thank you." Long Tianqing's eyes reddened when she heard this. She'd been worried about Divine Lord Jinyuan's body all this time. Mo Yuqian and the other Divine Lords also became excited when they heard this. In the next few months, Night Sorrow successfully refined the Heavenly 1000 Transformations pill under everyone's expectant gazes. He gave it to everyone who was injured. Chapter 2861. The Divine King was much stronger than the Divine Lord level. It wasn't easy to break through. However, Yi Shang's power of virtue had already reached the level of a lower God King. His comprehension of the ways of the world had completely taken shape, so he basically would not encounter any bottlenecks when breaking through to God King. It was basically a matter of time. In the accelerated space, Night Sorrow cultivated for about 20,000 years. His Yuan Qi and Divine Soul had both reached the Divine King level. Not long after, thick tribulation clouds appeared in the sky above the Immortal Dominion. The terrifying pressure made the Night Moon Dynasty members in the Domain Master's manor unable to raise their heads. Everyone below the Divine King was like an ant. Only Jin Ye, Long Tianqing and Mo Yan, and a few others had the ability to look up. Everyone immediately realized that Night Sorrow was about to undergo the Divine King's tribulation. If nothing unexpected happened, Night Sorrow would be ranked 8th in the Divine World after he passed the Divine King's tribulation and became a Divine King. Our Immortal Dominion can finally hold our heads high. Lin Piaomiao, who wasn't far from the Divine King's level, exclaimed when she saw the tribulation clouds. In the 200 years that Night Sorrow had been in seclusion, many factions had reached out to the Immortal Dominion. However, none of the rulers had wanted to be involved. Ruler All-Heaven, Ruler Darkmoon and Ruler Illustrious, who didn't get along with the Immortal Dominion, were all in seclusion, absorbing Ruler Moxie's laws and essence. Although none of the rulers were involved, the Immortal Dominion didn't retaliate under Night Sorrow's instructions. As a result, the Divine King's factions wanted a yard after taking an inch. Some had even fought their way to the Domain Master's manor and provoked them. Dragon Sparrow King and Fire Phoenix King were so angry that they almost attacked. However, they knew that they would follow Night Sorrow into the Eternal Sovereign World in the future. They wouldn't be of much help to the Immortal Dominion, so they didn't do anything. Haha, from now on, my immortal domain will be completely different. In a short 200 years, Tran Hung had already become a half-step Divine Lord. Although he could not look at the sky, he still smiled in relief. As long as Night Sorrow was here, the Deathless God Domain's soul would be unshakable. I feel like I'm about to make a breakthrough. At this moment who had encountered a bottleneck in his cultivation, suddenly had an epiphany. He discovered that he had welcomed a turning point to break through to the Divine Lord realm. Tran Hung returned to the spatial Dharma artifact in the domain chief's mansion and began to cultivate before she could watch Night Sorrow go through the tribulation. King Yawu was a little envious of Tran Hung's opportunity to break through. However, he felt that he would break through soon, so he was not in a hurry. As for Night Sorrow's wives and children, because they had come to the God realm earlier, most of them had already broken through to the monarch God realm. However, the people, including Sikong Chiyu, could not lift their heads to watch Night Sorrow go through the tribulation. This made them a little depressed. There was a feeling of helplessness in his heart. However, Long Tianqing soon became the commentator for everyone. About 5 days later, Long Tianqing suddenly said, "The Divine King's tribulation has taken shape." An energy body formed by the purplish-black thunder tribulation energy appeared and attacked the clear sky pagoda in the void. Night Sorrow flew out of the clear sky pagoda and met it with a punch. He met it, and then what happened? Long Tianqing suddenly paused and did not continue. Night Sorrow's wife, Yang Lei, immediately asked anxiously. In fact, she was not the only one. Everyone from the Night Moon dynasty who was present had their hearts in their throats. Night Sorrow blasted the thunder tribulation energy body with a punch and disappeared without a trace. I wonder if he succeeded in going through the tribulation. Long Tianqing said doubtfully. She wasn't too sure what was going on. When she heard that Night Sorrow had blasted the energy body away, Yang Lei's face lit up. Then she said, "No, if he succeeded, we would definitely be able to lift our heads. He probably didn't succeed." Boom. Just as Yang Lei finished speaking, the sound of a violent collision came from the void. He didn't succeed. The thunder tribulation energy body is much stronger than expected. Long Tianqing's voice trembled when she heard the sound of the collision. She had discovered that the thunder tribulation energy body contained a lot more energy than Night Sorrow's body. Furthermore, its attack seemed to contain a trace of a ruler's aura. Although this aura of a sovereign was very weak, it was still terrifying. This thunder tribulation energy body seems to be able to unleash a sovereign-level attack. Jinya, who had also discovered this, was also worried for Night Sorrow. Although the Sovereign and the Divine King were two adjacent realms, and the Thunder Tribulation energy body contained very little of the Sovereign's power, its might was simply terrifying. When they heard this, the expressions of Sikong Chiyu, Yang Lei, Aoi Shueshi Datira, Lin Piaomiao and the others all changed. They had all advanced to Divine Lords and were very clear about what a trace of the Sovereign's power represented. "Break for me." However, at this moment, Night Sorrow's roar came from the void. His roar shook the heavens and earth, but everyone's suspended hearts immediately calmed down. Then Night Sorrow, who was completely engaged in battle with the Thunder Tribulation energy body, roared, "The Thunder Tribulation is nothing to be afraid of. My family doesn't need to worry about me." In comparison, the energy in Yishang's body was naturally not as much as the Lightning Tribulation energy body. However, he had a large amount of Yuan-Qi recovery elixirs on him. With the help of these elixirs, the Lightning Tribulation energy body was slowly being consumed. A few days later, when the Thunder Tribulation energy body was completely depleted, a dazzling golden light bloomed in the sky above the immortal divine realm. The golden light has appeared. The Divine King has appeared. This is an auspicious sign. Night Sorrow has become the Divine King. Long Tianqing almost cried tears of joy when she saw the golden light. She was happy for Night Sorrow. The others in the immortal divine realm could finally raise their heads. At this moment, Yishang was floating in the air, surrounded by a golden light. He looked like a god that had descended to the mortal world, valiant and extraordinary. The golden light bloomed in the void and quickly spread to other parts of the divine realm. Soon, it spread to the entire world. Originally, the power of virtue had wanted to devour the golden light, but Night Sorrow had restrained it. Now that he had become the Divine King, he didn't want to keep a low profile. It didn't matter even if he had to sacrifice a little. Seeing the golden light coming from the immortal divine realm, Sovereign Tianai, who had been handling affairs in the sovereign manner, immediately summoned the Divine King of North Star to his manor. Prepare a congratulatory gift. Come with me to the immortal divine realm to congratulate the Divine King on becoming the Divine King. The immortal Divine King? Night Sorrow has become the Divine King so quickly? Is there a mistake? Chapter 2862. Are you doubting my judgment? Hegementianai frowned when he heard Divine King Northstar's words. His opponent's words were far too brainless. He was the number one expert of the god world. How could he possibly make a mistake like this? No, my lord. I'm not doubting you. It's just that Yishan has advanced to the God King realm in such a short period of time. This is simply too inconceivable. I'm afraid that he's the person who took the shortest amount of time to advance to the God King realm in the history of the God realm. The Divine King Northstar sighed. It hadn't been easy for him to break through to the Divine King level all those years ago. The significance of this matter doesn't mean that the God realm has gained another God King. Rather, it means that the God world has gained an eighth power. Hegementianai explained, then continued, You may go. Understood. Although the Divine King Northstar wasn't a peerless genius, he wasn't stupid either. He immediately understood what Hegementianai meant. This meant that once Night Sorrow broke through to the Divine King level, there was no Divine King who could match him. He was now the strongest person outside of the 7 hegemons. Soon after, Hegementianai brought the Divine King Northstar to the Deathless Divine Realm. Hegemon Clearsound, Hegemon Zhongkong, and Hegemon Skybuddha all came to congratulate him. The dragons and those from Cloud Immortal Continent all rushed over as well. As for the other powers that had taken over the Deathless Divine Realm, they all withdrew as soon as they heard the news. Thank you all for coming. My husband has just broken through to the Divine King level, and is in the process of stabilizing himself. Today, I'll take his place and welcome you all. While everyone was rushing over from all over the God world, Night Sorrow returned to the Clear Sky Pagoda to absorb the quintessence and laws he'd obtained from Hegemon Moxie. He wasn't satisfied with just breaking through to the Divine King level. He wanted to continue growing stronger. Sikong Chiyu was the one taking Night Sorrow's place. After all, she was Night Sorrow's first wife. She had a very special status in the Night Moon dynasty. Night Sorrow's other wives were here to help her. Good. It's the same with all of you taking care of him. Let him cultivate in peace. Hegementianai chuckled in response. He knew exactly what Night Sorrow was doing, and so he didn't say anything. If even the number one expert of the God world, Hegementianai, didn't say anything, the others naturally wouldn't. Then, under the hospitality of the people from the Night Moon dynasty, everyone happily enjoyed the celebratory feast. From beginning to end, Night Sorrow did not appear at the banquet. Furthermore, for the next 300 years, Night Sorrow did not leave the vast Heaven Pagoda all along. In these 300 years, Mo Yuqian, God Monarch Xin Yuan, and the others had all recovered and successfully came out of seclusion. Tran Heng and King Yawu had also become Divine Lords, becoming Divine Lord Tian Huang and Divine Lord Yawu. The two of them were very strong. They were very different from the ordinary divine monarchs of the divine realm. Moreover, they were also able to enforce the law with their words. As for Lin Piaomiao, she had already touched the barrier of the Divine King realm. She should be able to break through to the Divine King realm soon. At this point, the immortal domain was gradually stabilizing. Until one day, the tranquil immortal domain was suddenly shaken by an earth-shattering explosion. A sovereign of the dark abyss has descended upon the immortal domain. Before anyone in the immortal domain could react, Hegementianai was the first to understand what was going on. Upon hearing this, the Divine King Northstar immediately asked, Your Excellency, a sovereign of the dark abyss has descended. This is a huge matter for the God world. Should we go and help? Only a single sovereign has come. If Night Sorrow comes out of seclusion, he probably won't need anyone else's help. However, he's currently cultivating and might not be able to come out to fight. Let's go take a look. After saying this, Hegementianai and the Divine King Northstar set off. Elsewhere, Hegemon Voiceless was also rushing to the immortal domain. As for the other sovereigns, they hadn't set up any runes around the teleportation formation. They didn't know that a sovereign of the dark abyss had descended upon the immortal domain. How is it? Night Sorrow hasn't come out of seclusion yet? By the time Hegemony and Voiceless arrived, the immortal domain was already in chaos. The sovereign of the dark abyss was none other than the green-furred sovereign that Night Sorrow had agreed to fight. As soon as he arrived, he began a frenzied slaughter. Because the domain master's manor was protected by the worldly concealment formation, none of the important figures of the Night Moon dynasty had been injured. However, Night Sorrow still hadn't come out of seclusion. Kill! 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 The green-furred sovereign was growing more and more frenzied. Seeing him wreak havoc, Hegemon Voiceless couldn't help but say, "I'll fight him." She and Hegemony hadn't immediately attacked, because they wanted to give Night Sorrow a chance. Now that they saw the green-furred sovereign wreaking havoc, they couldn't hold back any longer. "I'll do it myself." However, just as Hegemon Voiceless was about to attack, Night Sorrow's figure suddenly emerged from the clear sky pagoda. He held the Samsara halberd in his hand, a confident expression on his face. He's finally come out of seclusion? Upon seeing Night Sorrow emerge, Hegemony and Hegemon Voiceless both smiled. Hegemony said, "Don't worry and fight him. If you can't beat him, I'll step in. I'm confident that I can defeat him." When Night Sorrow heard Hegemony's words, he turned his head and glanced at him. He glanced at his family, then flew in the direction of the green-furred sovereign. Hegemony and Hegemon Voiceless had brought the Yi clan's members into a spatial portal to watch the battle. Thus, it appeared that Night Sorrow and the two sovereigns had arrived together. The Divine King and two sovereigns have arrived? The green-furred sovereign, who had been wreaking havoc, revealed a look of shock when he saw Night Sorrow, Hegemony, and Hegemon Voiceless arrive. He hadn't expected to encounter two sovereigns as soon as he'd teleported to the Divine Realm. Why would two sovereigns, given their esteemed statuses, attack someone of your strength? Your opponent is me. Night Sorrow coldly rebuked the green-furred sovereign as he flew in front of him. Hegemony and Hegemon Voiceless retreated to the side to watch. The two of them wanted to see Night Sorrow's true potential. "It's you? You really dare to jump around in front of me?" Upon discovering that it was Night Sorrow, the green-furred sovereign immediately spoke disdainfully. As he saw it, the Divine King was still just the Divine King. He was on a completely different level from the sovereigns. "I told you that there would be a battle between us. I just didn't expect you to come to the Divine Realm to throw your life away." Upon seeing the destruction of the immortal Divine Realm and the cultivators that had been devoured, Night Sorrow's anger instantly soared. "Then let's see if you have the ability to do so." The green-furred sovereign had no intention of looking at Night Sorrow. He sneered. "Then attack immediately and let me see if you have the strength to fight." While speaking to Night Sorrow, the green-furred sovereign had been paying attention to Hegemony and Hegemon Voiceless. Chapter 2863. Hegemony chuckled when he realized that the green-furred Hegemon had been paying attention to him. "Given your strength, you won't be able to block my attacks even if you defend with all your might. I won't stoop to attacking you." Although they were both Hegemons, the difference in strength between them was like two whole realms. Hegemony didn't view the green-furred Hegemon as an opponent at all. Hegemon Voiceless sound said, "You're gauging the stature of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. I won't stoop to attacking you either. Since that's the case, just focus on how I'll kill this ant." After confirming that Hegemon Voiceless sound and Tianai wouldn't attack him, the green-furred Hegemon focused all his attention on Night Sorrow. "You'll soon understand that your worries are unnecessary. I don't need the two of them to deal with you." Seeing that the green-furred Hegemon had focused his attention on him, Night Sorrow, wielding the Samsara halberd, immediately thrust his spear at him. This spear looked similar to the Forbidden Reincarnation spear, but it was infused with Hegemon laws and was clearly not ordinary. "Oh, you're quite capable." The green-furred Hegemon was slightly surprised to see Night Sorrow's attack. He realized that Night Sorrow's attack was no different from an ordinary Hegemon's. Whether in terms of laws or strength, it wasn't inferior to his. In that instant, he immediately focused his attention. He used a vine-like arm to wrap around the incoming reincarnation spear. However, he still underestimated Night Sorrow. With a boom, the green-furred hegemon's arm was shattered. Good. Night Sorrow is no different from an ordinary hegemon in terms of strength. It's truly a blessing that such a genius has appeared in the God realm. Hegemon Tianai had a gratified smile on his face as he watched Night Sorrow's performance. Although the God realm had 7 hegemons, a few of them had bad characters and wouldn't fight for the God realm with all their strength. For a divine king of virtue like Night Sorrow to appear was the God realm's fortune. A lower divine king fighting a lower hegemon is the first time in the God realm. This is an epic-making event. Should we hurry and let the others watch? Hegemon Voiceless Sound wanted the entire God realm to watch this battle. Without question, if the cultivators of the God realm could see this battle, they would be greatly encouraged. There's no need for that. The ethereal mountain and the dark abyss aren't under much pressure. There's no need to motivate everyone. Hegemon Tianai shook his head. It's enough that you and I know about this. Don't let this leak out. Fine. My people won't say a word. Hegemon Voiceless nodded. She gazed at Nightsa's. She had a lot to. Was to Voiceless Sound? At this moment, Hegemon Tianai continued. The battle between the two of them has caused unnecessary damage. Let's help set up some defensive formations. Yes, I know. T2 voiced to attention to attention to attention T. S gods as Hitos SS? S2, TTUS re. S when Hegemon Voiceless Sound and Tianai attacked, the green-furred hegemon thought they were targeting him. Because of that, Night Sorrow's spear pierced through his body. It seems I've underestimated you. I should have treated you like a hegemon. If my guess is correct, what you've absorbed and comprehended is hegemon Moxie's laws and essence. Injured, the green-furred hegemon roared in fury, completely erupting with his brotherly instincts. He couldn't help but revert to his original appearance. He was no longer in human form. What kind of creature is this? How can it be so ugly? The Yi clan members in Hegemon Tianya's paradise sighed when they saw the green-furred hegemon's appearance. Although creatures of the dark abyss could revert to human form, their true forms were so ugly that they couldn't bear to look at them directly. This is his laws and essence. You'll have yours in the future. Night Sorrow brandished his samsara halberd, creating a black hole in space. Shameless boasting. I haven't even used any of my techniques yet. When the green-furred hegemon saw Night Sorrow brandish his samsara halberd again, he immediately summoned countless tentacles to block the attack. However, Night Sorrow, who had advanced to the Divine King level, was unstoppable. Without much effort, he shattered all of the green-furred hegemon's tentacles. Is this the technique you were talking about? After shattering the green-furred hegemon's tentacles, Night Sorrow immediately used his power of virtue to launch another attack. Night Sorrow's power of virtue had already reached the peak of the Lesser Divine King level. When he used it, he transformed into a golden dragon, fighting alongside Night Sorrow like a war pet. I didn't expect your merit power to be so powerful. The green-furred hegemon roared in shock when he saw that Night Sorrow could unleash such a powerful power of God. Then, his expression changed into one of disdain. But this alone isn't enough to fight against me. As he spoke, he took out a gourd-shaped divine artifact from his spatial artifact. He said, "Collect." The gourd-shaped divine artifact immediately sucked in all of the dragons of virtue. That's a sovereign artifact. Night Sorrow, you must be careful. Don't you also have a sovereign artifact? Just use it immediately. Hegemon Tianai couldn't help but warn him when he saw what the green-furred hegemon was doing. Okay, I'll be careful. In truth, even without Hegemon Tianya's warning, Night Sorrow could sense that the green-furred hegemon had taken out a sovereign artifact. He didn't panic, nor did he take out a sovereign artifact. Instead, he brandished his samsara halberd again, and continued to fight. Even without the help of the sovereign artifact and the power of virtue, Night Sorrow wasn't at a disadvantage. Although he was only a divine lord, he had accumulated far too much, and his luck was astonishing. He wasn't at a disadvantage at all. He quickly suppressed the green-furred hegemon once more. Just as they were madly fighting, Night Sorrow's other figure appeared in the Tianyan school. He handed Tianyan Bao over to Mu Baiyu, bade her farewell, then turned and left the Tianyan school. Mu Baiyu didn't know why, but when she saw Night Sorrow's departing figure, she felt like crying. This was something she hadn't experienced in many years. After returning Tianyan Bao, Night Sorrow returned to the immortal domain with another figure to watch his other body fight. The Night Sorrow fighting the green-furred hegemon was actually his clone. Due to the arrival of the ancestral phoenix, no one present had discovered Night Sorrow's true body. After personally witnessing his clone slay the hegemon of the Dark Abyss, Night Sorrow nodded in relief. Chapter 2864. Aren't you going to reunite with your family before leaving? Ancestor Phoenix asked doubtfully when he heard Night Sorrow's message. He was prepared to give Night Sorrow 10 years to reunite with his family. There's no need. No matter how many years I stay, I'll still have to solve the problem. Rather than stay in the God world for a few years in fear, it's better to go to the eternal Paragon world and solve the problem. He glanced once more in Sovereign Tianya's direction as he spoke resolutely. He was more reluctant to leave his family than anyone else, but for the sake of the God world's safety, he had to leave. Now that he saw Ancestor Phoenix's true body, he knew that the eternal Paragon world's crisis wasn't something that could be solved by hiding in the God world. Not only was their #1 expert missing, but they were also lacking in potential experts. Their luck was very bad. And in this cycle of reincarnation, the other realms of the eternal Paragon world were filled with geniuses. The God world's future was bleak and bleak. If you have such thoughts, it means I wasn't wrong about you. Let's go. Ancestor Phoenix nodded. Being in the depths of the vortex, he knew better than Night Sorrow about the God world's worrisome situation. He didn't even have time to catch up with old friends. At this time, inside Yishang's heavenly grotto, the Dragon Sparrow King and the Fire Phoenix King were crying their eyes out. Seeing their benefactor, the ancestral phoenix, again made them so emotional that they were weeping. Lord Ancestor Phoenix, can we go to your old residence to take a look? My elders and wife are receiving their inheritance there. I wonder how they're doing. I'm only worried about them right now. Night Sorrow said. He was very worried that Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei hadn't come out of seclusion yet. As for his other family members, they were all in the Heaven and Earth Concealment Formation in the Eternal Domain. They were protected by their clones, and had grown up. He wasn't too worried. All right, let's go. Ancestor Phoenix was as strong as Night Sorrow in the lower realms. It was difficult to quantify his strength. Soon he brought Night Sorrow to Ancestor Phoenix's lair. It's still the same as before. Not much has changed. Supreme Ancestor Phoenix's eyes flickered when he saw the scene in the Ancestral Phoenix's lair. It was obvious that he had recalled something that had happened in the past. At this time he saw that the Fire Phoenix guarding the nest had already grown to the level of the Divine King. He immediately said with gratification, "Very good, you didn't disappoint me. The Fire Phoenix King once told me that she wanted to follow you to the Eternal Supreme World and fight alongside you." Night Sorrow, who was standing beside the Ancestor Phoenix, saw that he was reminiscing about the past and immediately told him what the Fire Phoenix monarch was thinking. Sigh. Perhaps it was because of my selfishness, but I didn't want the children to go to the Eternal Supreme World. That was a cruel place after all. Whether it's in the Divine World or in other realms, it's very dangerous. Supreme Ancestor Phoenix let out a sigh. He was well aware that there were many people in Night Sorrow's space paradise, but he did not expose them. If one hears the Tao in the morning, one can die without regrets in the evening. If we leave them in the Divine World, there will be nothing to protect. They will be even more lost. Night Sorrow continued to speak on behalf of Dragon Sparrow King, Fire Phoenix King, and the others. He hoped that Supreme Ancestor Phoenix would take these people with him. Speaking of which, they did not belong to the Divine World at all. You have a point. Then let's take them. With my ability, I can still protect the children. Supreme Ancestor Phoenix sighed. He had not released his divine domain, but there was an indescribable Tao aura around him. Great. Dragon Sparrow King and Fire Phoenix King clenched their fists when they heard this. As for Mo Yen, who who was beside them, he had been very quiet. He did not say anything, but his eyes were also shining with tears. Xiao Tianquan's clansmen and the Horn clan did not speak. They did not even have the Divine King among them. If they went there, they would definitely be a burden. Therefore, they felt guilty in their hearts. Supreme Ancestor, how are my two family members now? After talking to Supreme Ancestor Phoenix about bringing people across the divine world, Night Sorrow asked about Wu Lingfei and Jing Yun. Wait for me to take a look. Supreme Ancestor Phoenix responded to Yi Shang, and then released the power of his soul to investigate. After a moment, he said in surprise, after they fused their bloodlines, although their talent is not as good as yours, it is enough for them to become the ruler of the eternal supreme world. Do you want to take them with you? Can they become the ruler of the eternal supreme world? Night Sorrow was silent for a while before continuing. After they finish fusing their bloodlines, let's see what they want. In fact, he knew that his other wife, Lin Piaomiao, also had outstanding talent after awakening her bloodline. But he could not bear to bring her to such a cruel eternal supreme world. Originally, they still needed 1,000 years to completely fuse their bloodlines. But let me help them quickly absorb it. After all, we can't afford to waste 1,000 years, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix said. She waved her hand and fired several glows. Under the illumination of these halos, the entire ancestral phoenix nest was like a phoenix undergoing nirvana, blooming with vitality. That kind of vitality was thousands of times stronger than just now. My lord, is my lord back? Fire Phoenix, who was guarding the ancestral phoenix nest with people, immediately became excited. The scene in front of her was something she had often seen before she had risen. It's me. This time, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix directly appeared in front of Fire Phoenix King. Then he said to Night Sorrow, let them out too. Okay. Hearing this, Night Sorrow immediately summoned Dragon Sparrow King, Fire Phoenix King, and Mo Yen, and the others who were related to Supreme Ancestor Phoenix out of the space grotto heaven. Then 7 days passed quickly as everyone exchanged greetings. On the 7th day, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix looked at Night Sorrow and said, your two family members are about to come out of seclusion. Just as he finished speaking, 2 consecutive phoenix cries rang out in the void. 2 fiery red figures rushed out of the small world one after another. What? They have already become Divine King? Their strength has increased so quickly? Night Sorrow used his divine soul power to investigate, and immediately found that Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei had already become Divine King. This made him extremely surprised. Especially Wu Lingfei, who had just broken through to the Divine Lord realm when she came here. Don't be surprised. Originally, they should have broken through to the Divine King after 1,000 years, but I used some methods. Supreme Ancestor Phoenix said with a smile and continued, go and ask them if they are willing to go to the eternal supreme world with you. The current Divine Realm territory needs such geniuses. Okay, I'll talk to them. To be honest, I don't want my family to go to the eternal supreme world with me. Chapter 2865. Night Sorrow, I understand what you're thinking. If it were me, I wouldn't want my family to appear in the Eternal Supreme Realm either. The so-called Eternal Supreme Realm is, in fact, a huge Azura field. It's filled with slaughter. And with worries, there's a weakness. This is also the reason why I left my bloodline in the God realm. The Ancestor Phoenix sighed as he looked at Night Sorrow's back. As someone who had experienced it, he understood Night Sorrow's thoughts very well. Night Sorrow, who had flown into the sky, came to Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei's side. He said excitedly, congratulations to the two of you for both advancing to the Divine King level. Thanks to you for bringing us here. We've inherited the Ancestor Phoenix bloodline, and a large amount of nomological power. When Wu Lingfei saw Yishang appear, she smiled faintly. Jing Yun, who was looking at Night Sorrow, said excitedly, husband, you've also advanced to the Divine King level? That's great. Haha, I also advanced by luck. Night Sorrow didn't mention the difficulties of advancing to the Divine King level. He stood beside the two women and pointed at the Ancestor Phoenix. This is Lord Ancestor Phoenix. He's already surpassed the ruler realm and became a sovereign. I'll take you to thank him for his gift first, then we'll talk about something else. What? This is Lord Ancestor? Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei both became excited when they saw where Night Sorrow was pointing. The two of them were both descendants of the Ancestor Phoenix, so they naturally addressed him differently from Night Sorrow. They flew to the Ancestor Phoenix's position side by side and knelt down. Greetings, Ancestor. Haha, get up. Two good children, your talents are already close to mine. I'm very pleased to see the two of you. A smile appeared on the Ancestor Phoenix's face. Although he didn't know which bloodline Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei came from, they were definitely his bloodline. Thank you for your gift, Ancestor. Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei felt like they were in a dream. They thanked him but didn't get up. Get up. Since you're family, there's no need to be so polite. The more Supreme Ancestor Phoenix looked at the two ladies, the more he liked them. After helping them up, he looked at Night Sorrow and said, "You can tell me now." "Good. Lord Supreme." Night Sorrow nodded, and then told Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei about the Eternal Supreme World, as well as the fact that he had cultivated a clone, and was about to go on an expedition. Furthermore, he analyzed the tragedy of the Eternal Supreme World word by word. Hearing this, Jing Yun immediately asked, "Then are all the sisters staying in the Divine Realm?" "We'll all stay in the Divine Realm. In fact, I hope that you'll choose to stay as well, but I'll respect your opinion." Night Sorrow glanced at Ancestor Phoenix and said, "If none of the sisters are going, then there's definitely no one to take care of you. I choose to go with you." Jing Yun made her choice without any hesitation. She didn't want to be separated from Night Sorrow's main body after cultivating for so many years. Even if there was no difference between a clone and the main body, it was still a clone after all. It was still different. Good. I'll support your choice. Night Sorrow nodded, and then looked at Wu Lingfei and said, "Aunt Fei, what's your choice?" In fact, when he said this, he already knew what she meant. At this moment, Wu Lingfei said longingly, "I don't want to leave you guys. I want to fight side by side with you and Jing Yun." "Sigh, all right. I'll respect your choice." Night Sorrow sighed, and then looked at Ancestor Phoenix and said, "Lord Supreme, let's go." "Good. I'll immediately open the passage to the Eternal Supreme World." After saying this, Ancestor Phoenix waved her hand, and everyone present was taken into the space paradise. Then she rose against the wind and soared into the sky. After flying to a height that Night Sorrow and the others couldn't reach, she opened a passage in the void and entered the Eternal Supreme World. After crossing the boundary, Ancestor Phoenix explained, "This passage is an extremely secretive existence. Only a few people in the Divine Realm know about it. In the future, if the Divine Realm loses in the Eternal Supreme World, they can temporarily transfer everyone back to the Divine Realm and plan to make a comeback. Of course, if the opponents in the Eternal Supreme World discover this void gate, the consequences will be devastating. Therefore, except for Night Sorrow, I'll erase the memories of the rest of you." After saying this, Ancestor Phoenix used a method to erase everyone's memories. As for Night Sorrow, he was the hope that Ancestor Phoenix and the others had high hopes for. He had the right to know this. "Even if Night Sorrow dies in battle, I won't expose this passage." Night Sorrow, the only one who knew about the passage, said to Ancestor Phoenix telepathically, "You're more important to the Divine Realm and the Divine Realm than this passage. At the critical moment, you'd rather reveal the passage to protect yourself." Supreme Phoenix Ancestor replied in a serious tone. When he heard this, Night Sorrow immediately asked doubtfully, "Your Excellency, is the territory of the God Realm so difficult in the Eternal Sovereign Realm?" The other party's words were filled with pessimism and despair, making him feel a suffocating pressure. "The Divine Realm's fortune is almost gone, and you are the only chance of survival for the Divine Realm according to our calculations." While they were flying towards a city in the territory of the God Realm, the Ancestor Phoenix explained helplessly, "Good. I'm mentally prepared." Ancestor Phoenix's words were not for the others to hear. Night Sorrow was prepared for everything in his heart. After all, the Divine Realm and the 9 regions world were likely to be destroyed if the Divine Realm was destroyed. He had to hold back the hand of fate. He did not want it to sink and smash everything. When we reach the main city, I'll make arrangements for the others. Then, I'll bring you and the two of them to meet some important people," Ancestor Phoenix said as they approached the city of the Divine Realm. She also told Night Sorrow how to make arrangements for these people. Although the Fire Phoenix King and the others were already the Divine King, they were just ordinary existences in the eternal supreme world. At present, there was no chance for them to fight at all. They could only do some service work in the rear. Only when they advanced to the Dominator level could they really participate in the battle. The battle in the eternal supreme world was somewhat different from the Divine Realm. The battle in the Divine Realm usually involved tens of millions of cultivators, but the battle in the eternal supreme world was basically not too big. The battle between the two realms might send out a large number of puppets or even demons, but the people who really participated in the battle basically did not exceed 30 people. However, it would be a battle of the elite level. Often, the Dominators or Supremes would be sent out. Among them, the Dominators were the most important main force. If the Divine King appeared, they were likely to be killed in one move. "Lord, we will cultivate well and strive to break through to the Dominator level quickly." Chapter 2866. However, at this moment, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix sighed and said, "It's not easy to cultivate to the Sovereign Realm because there are no extra resources for you in the Divine World City. Other than Night Sorrow, no one can obtain resources in the Divine World City without fighting." Supreme Ancestor Phoenix sighed and said, "This is also one of the important reasons why I didn't want to bring you here." "It's okay, Supreme Ancestor. Night Sorrow will get them enough cultivation resources." When everyone heard Supreme Ancestor Phoenix's words, they were a little disheartened. At this moment, Night Sorrow promised. What he meant was naturally not to rely on his identity to obtain resources, but to obtain enough resources for everyone through fighting. "I believe you can do it." Hearing Night Sorrow's words, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix nodded in relief and said, "This is also one of the reasons why I brought them here." "Haha. Supreme Ancestor, don't worry. In the near future, all the Divine King present will advance to the Sovereign Realm." Although Night Sorrow didn't know the details of the battle and resource allocation in the Eternal Supreme Realm, he was still confident in fighting. After all, although he was the Divine King, he already had the ability to fight against ordinary sovereigns. "We've arrived at the Divine World City. I'll bring the three of you to meet someone." At this moment, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix led everyone to the Divine World City. He split out a clone and took King Fire Phoenix, and the others away. His main body led Night Sorrow, Jingyun, and Wu Lingfei to the City Lord Mansion of the Divine World City. "The Child of Destiny has been brought here." As soon as they arrived outside the City Lord Mansion, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix began to shout, "Quickly bring him in." A shout immediately came from the City Lord Mansion. "Come out and follow me in." At this moment, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix released Night Sorrow and the others from the Space Grotto Heaven, and had them follow him in. What a solid world. As soon as he was released, Night Sorrow felt a majesty different from the Divine World. The world of the Eternal Sovereign World was simply too solid. Walking on the ground, Night Sorrow could feel that even if he attacked with all his might, it wouldn't cause too much damage to the ground. This was unimaginable in the Deity Realm. In the Deity Realm, after becoming a Divine King, he could even shatter the void, let alone mountains and rivers. Is this the Child of Destiny of the God World? Not only was he the Divine King, but he also looked like he had never seen the world before. What a disappointment. Night Sorrow had just opened his mouth when a discordant voice came from behind. There were originally 5 or 6 ruler realm cultivators eating in the restaurant opposite the City Lord's manor. The teasing Night Sorrow was one of the handsome male cultivators. He was a middle hegemon. 10,000 Sword Sect. You weren't any better than the others when you came. Regarding this, Night Sorrow did not say anything, while Supreme Ancestor Phoenix coldly glanced at him. After being glanced at by Supreme Ancestor Phoenix, the cultivator called 10,000 Sword Sect immediately continued drinking with an awkward expression. Drinking in the Eternal Sovereign World was a very extravagant thing. Today they were drinking here, obviously waiting for Night Sorrow's arrival. waiting for Night Sorrow to be brought into the City Lord's manor by Supreme Ancestor Phoenix. 10,000 Swords Sex said unhappily. I originally thought that a ruler would join our team. Who would have thought that it would be such a divine king? The two girls beside him are not bad. He's just lacking a little bit. That's right. If a heaven-defying ruler appeared, it would be of some help to us. What's the matter with a divine king? Another hegemon said unhappily. Forget it, forget it. At most, we won't fight for that opportunity. The only female cultivator present also had an ugly expression. As soon as she finished speaking, the sovereigns present all sighed. They were clearly extremely disappointed. While everyone was drinking, Night Sorrow, Jing Yun, and Wu Lingfei were brought to the guest hall of the City Lord's manor by Supreme Ancestor Phoenix. Although the City Lord's manor was large, the structure was similar to the buildings of the divine world. After arriving at the guest hall, Night Sorrow saw a total of 10 Supremes sitting there. These Supremes were not inferior to Supreme Ancestor Phoenix. They were all legendary figures and extremely powerful. Among them was the Horn Clan's Paragon, whom Yishang had met once. What's going on? The Child of Destiny that you mentioned is only at the Divine King's level? And it's a lower Divine King, what's going on? Night Sorrow's gaze had just landed on Supreme Horn and he smiled at him. A cold and angry voice sounded on the spot. The person who complained was Supreme White Tiger of the Divine World. He was very strong, even stronger than Supreme Ancestor Phoenix. His status in the Divine World was very high. That's right, what can a Divine King bring about? By the time he's nurtured, it'll be too late. Supreme Ancestor Dragon also spoke. Ancestor Dragon, White Tiger, Ancestor Phoenix, and Black Tortoise, the 4 Supremes, had very high status in the Divine World, second only to the City Lord and 2 Deputy City Lords. At this time, the City Lord was missing, and the 2 Deputy City Lords were not around. Basically, the 4 of them were in charge of the overall situation. Supreme Ancestor Dragon's gaze toward Night Sorrow was not as unfriendly as Supreme White Tiger's, but he was also a little disappointed. The two of you, don't get agitated first. Although Night Sorrow has just broken through to the Divine King realm, and is a lower Divine King, his true combat strength is already not inferior to ordinary sovereigns. I saw with my own eyes that he used his clone to kill a sovereign of the Dark Abyss. Now that it's his true body that came to the Divine World, his combat strength is definitely higher. Supreme Ancestor Phoenix immediately explained when he saw that some of the big shots present were dissatisfied. Actually, his status was not inferior to Supreme White Tiger and Supreme Ancestor Dragon. He was so polite because he wanted to give everyone a satisfactory explanation. Oh, a lower Divine King can fight sovereigns? If that's really the case, then he's really a talented genius. After hearing Supreme Ancestor Phoenix's explanation, Supreme Ancestor Dragon's gaze toward Night Sorrow changed instantly. However, Supreme White Tiger said coldly, I'm afraid that no matter how strong a lower Divine King is, he can only fight a lower sovereign, right? Ancestor Phoenix, you should know what kind of genius we need right now. Those prepared resources are not as good as nurturing the Myriad Sword sect. Of course I know. However, the speed of Night Sorrow's rise is far beyond the scope of your understanding. Although he's only a Divine King now, his room for improvement is incomparably huge, and his cultivation speed is extremely fast. If nothing unexpected happens, he will soon surpass the Myriad Sword sect's combat strength. As Supreme Ancestor Phoenix explained, his voice became colder. Therefore, we still need to give those resources to Night Sorrow. I also agree to give those resources to Night Sorrow. I've divined that he's our future. At this moment, Supreme Ancestor Horn also spoke up for Night Sorrow. Supreme White Tiger continued to shake his head. No. In 100 years, our Divine World territory must fight for that matter, or our luck will definitely be exhausted. We must do our best to nurture the Myriad Sword sect, or we won't have any chance at all. Chapter 2867. When the White Tiger Sovereign had voiced his doubts, the Horn Sovereign had already sent a voice transmission to Night Sorrow to explain the importance of those resources. Those resources were enough to raise a cultivator from a lesser sovereign to a peak sovereign. Moreover, These resources were obtained by the experts of the God realm, by killing the invincible sovereigns of other realms. As long as one successfully absorbed them, even an ordinary sovereign's strength would increase greatly. These laws and essences were unique in the current God realm. They were not something that could be replaced by other resources to increase one's strength. Therefore, the Horn Sovereign and Ancestor Phoenix Sovereign meant that Night Sorrow had to obtain these resources. As for the White Tiger Sovereign, he was worried that Night Sorrow's cultivation was only at the Divine King's level. He would not be able to absorb the laws and essences of these invincible sovereigns within 100 years and grow to the strength they hoped for. The Myriad Sword Sect was currently the most outstanding rising star in the God realm. They were already mid-level sovereigns. If they could absorb these laws and essences, they would steadily grow into a relatively powerful upper-level sovereign. Therefore, choosing the Myriad Sword Sect was a mediocre choice, but it was relatively safe. As for the battle for karmic luck in 100 years, those who participated had to be below the supremacy level. They could be sovereigns or divine king, but any realm would send a sovereign team. Realms with good results would obtain a large amount of karmic luck. Realms with bad results would have their karmic luck compressed by the heavenly Tao. Normally speaking, as long as their karmic luck was about the same, there would not be too much of an impact. However, the current God realm's karmic luck was almost exhausted. If the heavenly Tao compressed their karmic luck, the result would be unimaginable. Therefore, they could not afford to lose this battle for karmic luck. That's him. Could it be that you want to fight him? After Nightshang spoke, the White Tiger Paragon stared coldly at him, as if he wanted to see through him. The feeling he gave Yishang was that he was completely invulnerable. He was so strong that it made people feel like they couldn't go against him. Is this the true strength of a supremacy? Although the White Tiger Sovereign did not release his aura, Night Sorrow still felt heavy pressure. He sighed in his heart and continued. Yishang has the intention to fight. If I can defeat an intermediate hegemon while at the Divine King's level, then won't the objections of Exalted White Tiger and Exalted Ancestral Phoenix be resolved? Oh, you do have some guts, but you are too arrogant. The Lesser Divine King defeated an intermediate hegemon. Are you overestimating yourself? Or are you underestimating the experts of the world? The White Tiger ruler berated the Night Sorrow before turning to the Ancestor Phoenix and saying, "Is this the kind of useless, arrogant piece of trash you brought back?" White Tiger Sovereign, I can understand why you thought so highly of the Myriad Sword Sect. But you shouldn't have slandered Night Sorrow like that. If he is trash, then you and the 10,000 Swords Sect that you favor are worse than trash. Supreme Ancestor Phoenix wasn't angry at first. However, Supreme White Tiger actually used the word trash to describe Night Sorrow. He was instantly enraged. You want to fight? Exalted White Tiger roared coldly when he saw that Supreme Ancestor Phoenix had actually insulted him in order to protect Night Sorrow. At this moment, he was emitting a strong fighting spirit. Night Sorrow, who was standing nearby, was clearly affected. However, he didn't make a sound. It's not a fight between you and me. It's a fight between Night Sorrow and the Myriad Sword Sect. Whoever wins will get those resources. What do you think? Supreme Ancestor Phoenix hadn't been angry with Exalted White Tiger at first, because the latter had been speaking from the perspective of the God realm. Now, however, he had turned into a personal attack. Furthermore, he gave off the feeling that he was purposely protecting the Myriad Sword Sect. Right now, the Divine Realm's territory was already on the brink of life and death. As one of the people in charge of the Divine Realm's territory, if the White Tiger Sovereign was unable to treat the rising stars fairly and had selfish actions, it would definitely affect the overall situation. This definitely wasn't a good thing. Fine. Let's fight. If the Myriad Sword Sect can't even win against a lower sovereign, then I have nothing to say. Exalted White Tiger glanced at Night Sorrow, then sent a voice transmission to the Myriad Sword Sect. Come over. Clearly, no matter who Supreme Ancestor Phoenix brought back today, there would be a fight. The Myriad Sword Sect's appearance near the City Lord's mansion was long prepared. Okay, Lord Supreme. Inside the restaurant, the Myriad Sword Sect received Exalted White Tiger's voice transmission. He immediately looked at the sovereigns present and said, "Help me heat up a pot of wine." I'll be back soon. Okay, Brother Juan, we'll wait for you here. The sovereigns present didn't dare to follow Exalted White Tiger into the city lord's mansion without receiving orders. Thus, they could only wait outside. Haha. Exalted White Tiger didn't smile at the crowd. He turned and flew toward the city lord's mansion. They had just met, and he knew that Night Sorrow's cultivation was only at the lower Divine King's level. Thus he was bursting with confidence. After arriving at the reception hall, Exalted White Tiger looked coldly at Night Sorrow, a disdainful smile on his face. However, he didn't send a voice transmission because he knew that everyone present was a supreme. If he sent a voice transmission on the spot, it would definitely be heard. Exalted White Tiger. This is Night Sorrow, the child of destiny who was brought here from the lower realm. Next, you will fight with him. The winner will be nurtured by the God Realm's territory. The sovereign's laws and essence are only the first part of the resources. After that, there will be various resources brought by the sovereigns. Do you understand what to do? After Exalted White Tiger explained the situation to Exalted White Tiger, he didn't introduce Exalted White Tiger to Night Sorrow. Obviously, he had neglected Night Sorrow's existence. Lord Supreme, I won't lose to an ant at the Divine King's level. Exalted White Tiger replied confidently. His gaze on Night Sorrow grew more and more unfriendly. At this time, Exalted White Tiger looked at Night Sorrow and said, Night Sorrow, I know that your strength has increased rapidly, but the sovereign's laws and essence are incomparably important. You must obtain them. As for the Thousand Sword Sect and the Myriad Sword Sect, they are all the same to you. There is no need to understand them. Yes, Lord Supreme, Night Sorrow understands. Although Exalted White Tiger and Exalted White Tiger were important figures of status, and were rather secretive in various aspects, the smell of gunpowder still unconsciously spread. Night Sorrow replied to Paragon Ancestral Phoenix, then turned to look at the 10,000 Sword Sect. As far as he was concerned, although the 10,000 Sword Sect was strong, as a sovereign lord, he was lacking in boldness. Compared to someone like Sovereign Lord Tianai, he was a bit lacking. Thus, the pressure he felt wasn't as great as he had imagined. Lord Supreme, where shall we exchange pointers? The sword at Exalted White Tiger's waist can't wait to be unsheathed. Chapter 2868. As far as the Myriad Sword Sect was concerned, Night Sorrow, a lesser divine king, wouldn't be able to cause any waves in front of him, no matter how talented he was. He would easily end the battle, and win in a very elegant manner. As for Night Sorrow, the so-called child of destiny, he would lose miserably. All the resources that had been prepared for him would fall into his hands. After obtaining those resources, the Myriad Sword Sect will become the #1 ruler of the God Realm. There were currently a few rulers in the God Realm who were stronger than the Myriad Sword Sect, but he seemed to be the most talented of them all. As long as he could advance to the level of a higher ruler, he would be able to crush everyone else. When he thought of the resources he would likely obtain, he couldn't help but smile. Just spar here. With so many autarchs here, you won't be able to cause any waves. The White Tiger Sovereign reprimanded the Myriad Sword Sect unhappily when he saw the greedy smile on his face. The Myriad Sword Sect was roused from his reverie by the White Tiger Sovereign's rebuke. He knew that what he'd just done wasn't right. He put on an act and gestured toward Night Sorrow, but said contemptuously, Night Sorrow, please make your move. Blades have no eyes. If I go too far, I'll have to ask you to forgive me. You don't even know how to pretend to be a gentleman. Have you cultivated until you've gone stupid? If you were in the God Realm, you would have been schemed against by some evil ruler long ago. Yishang took in the 10,000 Sword Sect's reaction, and smiled without batting an eyelid. He replied, please. After saying the word please, Night Sorrow released his own god domain. He no longer had the heavenly Samsara halberd, Tianyun Bao, or the sky cloud staircase. Even his power of virtue was only half of what it was. However, after absorbing more than half of Ruler Moxie's laws and essence, his strength had increased by a terrifying amount. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to kill the green-furred ruler of the Dark Abyss with just a clone. A divine domain is unexpectedly strong. When Night Sorrow released his Samsara domain, Master Myriad Sword's expression changed. Although Night Sorrow had yet to make a move, the 10,000 Sword sects suddenly felt as if they were being suppressed by 10,000 mountains when God's domain pressed down on them. That kind of feeling was definitely not brought about by an ordinary divine king. The master of the 10,000 Sword sect, who had been underestimating their opponent, suddenly became cautious. Resisting the pressure from Night Sorrow's Samsara domain, he drew his sword and said, "Take out your divine weapon. I'm going to draw my sword." Be good. As expected of the child of destiny, even though he has just advanced to the lower divine king, his divine domain is already so terrifying. Given enough time, his future will be limitless. The Horn Race's Prime, who was paying attention to the battle, nodded in satisfaction when he saw the battle before him. Before Night Sorrow even moved, Master Wanjian had already drawn his sword, proving that Night Sorrow had the upper hand in the first round. Not bad indeed. Of all the people present, not even the lower divine king has such a terrifying divine domain. Ancestor Phoenix Prime also smiled, then looked at Prime White Tiger and said, "Have you ever seen a lower divine king who can suppress an intermediate sovereign with a divine domain?" I don't deny that Night Sorrow's talent is high, and his foundation is deep, but what we lack is time. There is no time left for him to grow. As for the 10,000 Sword sect, it's different. As long as the resources are in place, they will definitely reach the peak of the sovereign realm within 100 years. Although Prime White Tiger admitted that Night Sorrow's foundation was astonishing, he still didn't agree. He still felt that the 10,000 Sword sect was the most suitable choice. At this moment, Yishang, who was looking at the 10,000 Sword sect, patted his chest and said, "My body is a divine artifact. Draw your sword." Although he didn't have a divine weapon, he was very confident in the strength of his body. Moreover, Night Sorrow could sense that although Master Wanjian wasn't weak, he was only slightly stronger than the green-furred sovereign of the Dark Abyss. Moreover, his combat experience wasn't very rich. Although he was fighting empty-handed, he still had a chance of winning. How laughable. You dare to be arrogant in front of a powerhouse. My 10,000 Sword sect will teach you a lesson today. You will realize that a divine domain doesn't represent everything. Under the interference of Night Sorrow's divine domain, Master Wanjian felt as if he had sunk into a swamp. His speed was severely affected, but he still had the confidence to win. He didn't believe that a lower divine king could take care of everything and not lose to a sovereign in any aspect. Thousand Feather Flower Burial Sword. Master Wanjian, who had also released his divine domain, roared and used a sword move. As soon as Thousand Feather Flower Burial Sword was used, thousands of white feathers and thousands of red petals appeared in the void. These feathers and petals looked breathtakingly beautiful. However, in Night Sorrow's opinion, this move was definitely not simple, because it contained terrifying sovereign-level laws. Clam Dragon's Eye, activate. In an instant, Night Sorrow activated the Clam Dragon's Eye, which had also been upgraded after becoming a divine king. He observed the origin of Thousand Feather Flower Burial Sword. Seeing this, Night Sorrow was shocked. Under the cover of the feathers and petals that filled the sky, Master Myriad Sword was actually thrusting his sword over. Break! If he hadn't activated the Clam Dragon's Eye in time, Night Sorrow's body would probably have been pierced by this sword. However, now that he saw the shocking sword clearly, and in a situation where he wasn't at a disadvantage in terms of strength, he fiercely slapped out with his palm and knocked Master Wanjian's sword aside. Heaven Covering Hand. After knocking Master Wanjian's sword aside, Night Sorrow, who didn't have any divine artifacts, immediately used Heaven Covering Hand on him. He had learned this move a long time ago. It was a very crude move, and he hadn't used it in a long time. However, when he used it now, its power wasn't weak at all, and he immediately slapped it towards Master Wanjian's face. If this move hit, Master Wanjian's deity ocean would probably be destroyed. He was so scared that he immediately used his movement technique to move over. Although Master Wanjian's movement technique was amazing and he dodged in an instant, the wind from Night Sorrow's palm still shook off his hair bun. For a moment, his long black hair immediately scattered. He looked a little miserable. Good move. Night Sorrow's move isn't even a divine artifact, but it can return to its original state and cause damage to Master Wan Jian. This is not simple. Seeing the battle in front of him, Ancestor Phoenix smiled in relief. This time he didn't mock White Tiger Supreme, as he felt that there was no need to. How can my Master Wan Jian suffer under the attack of a Divine King Ant? No, this is impossible. Go to hell. Rainbow Piercing Sword. Chapter 2869. The Sword of the Sun-Piercing Rainbow was obviously different from the Myriad Feather Burial. Comparatively, the Myriad Feather Burial was obviously more flashy. However, the Sword of the Sun-Piercing Rainbow was definitely more like a heavy sword without a sharp edge. Good sword. Even Knight Sorrow couldn't help but praise. His opponent's sword move was extremely imposing. The White Tiger Supreme and Ancestor Phoenix Supreme also nodded at Myriad Sword Sect's sword move. Myriad Sword Sect was currently the ruler of the God Realm with the most potential. Naturally, he was capable. Otherwise, even if the White Tiger Supreme was his uncle, he wouldn't be of much help. Let's see how you're going to break it. This move was already one of Myriad Sword Sect's most important killing moves. He roared after thrusting out his sword. The master of the 10,000 Sword Sect's long hair fluttered in the wind at this moment. He had completely entered a mysterious state of selflessness. He didn't hold back at all as he integrated himself into the sword move. Divine Origin Trapping Array. Knight Sorrow could have dodged Myriad Sword Sect's move. However, he didn't. Instead, he used the Divine Origin Trapping Array. This Divine Origin Trapping Array was a variant of the Divine Origin Dragon Locking Array. Knight Sorrow had further improved it. After the improvement, it was more convenient to use in battle. The energy consumption was also better. However, the trapping effect was very good. Boom! Myriad Sword Sect's sword, which was originally aimed at Knight Sorrow, was blocked by the Divine Origin Trapping Array. Instantly, his sword struck the array's barrier. Although the Divine Origin Trapping Array was directly pierced by the sword, Myriad Sword Sect's sword had almost lost its power. 33 Heaven's Secret Battle Technique. At this moment, Knight Sorrow took the opportunity to use the 33 Heavens Battle Secret Technique, greatly increasing his strength. Then he used the Divine Origin Trapping Formation again, locking down the Master of 10,000 Swords position, and directly striking his sword out of his hand. Now that you don't have a divine artifact with you, let me see how good your close combat skills are. After striking Myriad Sword Sect's sword out of his hand, Knight Sorrow immediately began close combat with him. Do you think I'm afraid of a divine king like you? Even though the 10,000 Sword Sect had not gained the upper hand since the beginning of the battle, he still felt that Knight Sorrow could not possibly be perfect in every aspect. He didn't even pick up his sword from the ground. Instead, he chose to engage in close combat with Knight Sorrow. However, Knight Sorrow's close combat abilities were very strong, and he displayed an extremely wild fighting style. It was almost like he was sacrificing 800 to injure the enemy. Very soon, he and the 1,000 Sword Sect were both heavily injured. However, since both sides were injured, their reactions were different. Knight Sorrow had chosen this method of battle, and the 1,000 Sword Sect had been forced to fight this way. Originally, the 1,000 Sword Sect thought that he could easily defeat Knight Sorrow, but now he realized that the lower Divine King in front of him was definitely at the level of a sovereign. Even though he was not necessarily stronger than himself, he was definitely not much weaker. Furthermore, there was an indescribable wildness on Yi Shang's body. When fighting him, the Myriad Sword Sect felt like they were facing an ancient ferocious beast. That kind of ferocious battle intent was simply unlike that of a cultivator from the God Realm. Now you know fear. Even though they were evenly matched, Knight Sorrow's heart was like a boulder. He continued to attack the 1,000 Sword Sect madly, like a tidal wave. He knew that the 1,000 Sword Sect's true strength was not weak. In fact, they were even slightly stronger than him. Therefore, when he fought, he had to show his fierceness and make them fear him. Only then would he have a chance to win. Afraid? My 1,000 Sword Sect, afraid of a bumpkin from below? Laughable, truly laughable. The battle was not satisfying at all. The 1,000 Sword Sect was thoroughly enraged. He released his Divine Spirit energy and transformed it into a Divine Spirit sword. He slashed it directly at Night Sorrow's head. This move did not hit the body, but the divine spirit. It was a terrifying attack. Amazing! Facing this move of the Thousand Swords sect, Night Sorrow suddenly felt his body tighten. He felt a great pressure. If he was hit by this sword, his divine spirit would probably be directly torn apart. After thinking for a moment, Night Sorrow roared, "Gentle Dragon Roar!" Choosing to use a movement technique to escape at a time like this was obviously not advisable. At this moment, Night Sorrow remembered the Gentle Dragon Roar that the Dragon Sparrow King had taught him. He suddenly roared. Boom! After being attacked by the Gentle Dragon Roar, the divine spirit sword formed by the Thousand Swords sect was instantly shattered. The Thousand Swords sect also spat out blood and abruptly sat on the ground. After being injured by this move, his divine spirit was greatly damaged. He felt as if his divine spirit was being torn apart. How is this possible? How is this possible? It's just a divine king. How is it that he's not weaker than me in all aspects? After being heavily injured by this move, the Thousand Swords sect sitting on the ground was clearly stunned. He did not dare to believe that a lower divine king would not lose to him in any aspect. No. Pull yourself together. I have to pull myself together. If this goes on, even if I'm not defeated, the supreme beings will announce the end of the battle. The Thousand Swords sect, who was still a little confused at first, immediately flew up from the ground and floated in the air. He roared crazily, "Die! Great Immortal Sword Technique!" Then his entire body turned into a sharp sword and blasted towards Night Sorrow. Great Immortal Sword Technique? It's actually the long-lost Great Immortal Sword Technique. This is the Great Tao. The Thousand Swords sect is indeed not bad. The White Tiger Supreme, who was originally extremely disappointed, saw his nephew, the Thousand Swords sect, use the Great Immortal Sword Technique. He immediately calmed down and nodded in satisfaction. In fact, if the Thousand Swords sect was not his nephew, although he would consider the Thousand Swords sect, he would not protect him like today. There would also not be a battle between the two of them. The Great Immortal Sword Technique is indeed this move. It's not without reason that the Thousand Swords sect is favored by everyone. Night Sorrow, I hope you can hold on. As long as you can withstand this move, the winner will be you. Seeing the Thousand Swords sect use the Great Immortal Sword Technique, the Horn Supreme immediately worried for Night Sorrow. Speaking of which, he was the one who used divination to determine that Night Sorrow was the child of destiny. Naturally, he hoped that Night Sorrow could achieve something. Great Immortal Sword Technique? It's definitely not simple to be praised by the supreme beings. How should I break it? Facing the Thousand Swords sect who had turned into a sword, Night Sorrow frowned and thought for a moment. Then his eyes flashed. Imitating the Thousand Swords sect, he also turned into a sword and flew towards the Thousand Swords sect's sword form. Great Immortal Sword Technique? How is this possible? How do you know my ultimate technique? The 10,000 Swords sect was astonished to see Night Sorrow transform into a giant sword as well. Idiot! His move is fake. Can't you tell? Chapter 2870. However, Master 10,000 Swords was clearly confused by the situation, and his mind was clearly shaken. Taking advantage of the fact that Master 10,000 Swords' mind was shaken, and did not continue to lock onto Night Sorrow successfully dodged this attack. Although he did not take advantage of Master 10,000 Swords' mind to launch a counterattack, the other party had used up a lot of energy to use such a trump card. When the Great Immortal Sword Technique bombarded the barrier that Ancestor Phoenix had set up for the two of them, Paragon White Tiger was so angry that his nose was crooked. He had never thought that Master 10,000 Swords' mind would be shaken in the middle of a battle. This was fatal to cultivators, especially those at the level of rulers. You've lost. At this time, Night Sorrow did not use up much energy, but after Master 10,000 Swords used the Great Immortal Sword Technique, his body's divine essence was basically emptied. If he continued to fight, he might not even be able to use 60% of his strength. Yi Shang said confidently when he saw Yi Mo's condition. Damn it! How did I fall for your trick just now? The Great Immortal Sword Technique was Master 10,000 Swords' greatest reliance, and at the same time, his greatest pride. Therefore, when Night Sorrow imitated it just now, he was immediately stunned. Now that he thought about it, he was extremely regretful. However, he no longer had the ability to use it again. Your sword technique just now was very exquisite, and its power was also very terrifying. The first time you used it, it was a great threat to me, but if you use it again, it won't be much of a threat. You don't have to think about it anymore. Use the great immortal sword technique again. Floating in the void, Night Sorrow looked at Master 10,000 Swords and said, the great immortal sword technique was very mysterious, but after experiencing it once, he had seen through its rules and was no longer afraid of its power. Shameless boasting, if not for my carelessness, you would have already lost. You know that I can't use it again, so you're deliberately showing off, right? Master 10,000 Swords said unwillingly. If he had divine essence to support him to use the great immortal sword technique again, he would not hesitate to use it on Night Sorrow again. However, the divine essence in his body was not enough to support this operation at all. How about this? Let's make a bet. I'll let you consume some Yuan Qi recovery pills. Once you recover, you can use the great immortal sword art again. If I can't handle it, then it'll be my loss. If I can take it, you admit defeat. What do you think? Generally speaking, in this kind of showdown, one could not consume any medicinal pills. However, at this moment, Night Sorrow opened his mouth and gave the myriad sword sect a chance. Although he had just arrived at the Eternal Supreme Realm, and did not have many tricks up his sleeves, it was still possible for him to withstand the great immortal sword art. After all, he had already deduced the trajectory of the great immortal sword art. Therefore, he was no longer afraid of this move. Hearing this, Master Wan Jian felt as if he had been insulted. He had the strength of an intermediate dominator, while his opponent was only a lower divine king. However, Night Sorrow had given him the opportunity to consume the pill. This caused his cheeks to heat up. He wanted to say something, but he didn't. This is killing and destroying the heart. In the sword sect, swordsmen are born fearless. Whatever you want to do, just follow your heart. Remember, don't lose your confidence. Seeing that Master Wan Jian was in a dilemma, the White Tiger Sovereign immediately reminded him. Even the many supremes present did not notice this sentence. When Master Wan Jian heard it, he immediately felt as if he had been enlightened. In an instant, boundless confidence rose. After a moment of silence, he looked at Night Sorrow and said coldly, I agree to your bet. After saying that, he did not give Night Sorrow or the other supremes a chance to refute. He directly swallowed 3 medicinal pills to recover his vitality, and readjusted his strength to the peak. Now that you have recovered your vitality, you can use the great immortal sword art. Night Sorrow said and waited for Master Wan Jian to make his move. The great immortal sword art was more exquisite than any supreme art he had seen in the God realm. He had learned a lot from observing it once. If he experienced it again, he might be able to comprehend his own supreme art. Okay. However, swords have no eyes. If you die under this move, I will not be responsible. Master Wan Jian, who had readjusted his divine realm and aura to the peak, stared coldly at Night Sorrow and prepared his great immortal sword art. This time, Night Sorrow had given him enough time. He could fully display the great immortal sword technique of the myriad sword sect. It was even more powerful than the previous attack. Don't worry and use it. I believe that even if I lose, the Supremes won't just watch me be killed. After all, we are learning from each other, not fighting to the death. Night Sorrow said indifferently. He had an aura of disregard for his own life. That boldness of disregard for life and death satisfied not only Supremes Zhu Feng and the Horn Clan, but also some of the other Supremes present. At this point in the battle, they could already confirm that Night Sorrow was a rare genius who needed to be nurtured with all their might. However, there was a bet, and they could not interrupt the battle in front of them. Big. Immortal. Sword. Art. Master Wan Jian, who had been preparing for a while, once again turned into a sharp sword and bombarded Night Sorrow's position. This time, he had completely locked onto Night Sorrow's aura, and had already mentally prepared himself to not be affected by any external factors. However, this time, Something that surprised the Wanjian house happened once again. At this moment, Knight Sorrow didn't dodge the Great Celestial Sword Art. Instead, he imitated the Great Celestial Sword Art and attacked. In the void, the two figures had completely turned into similar sword shadows and bombarded the same point. In fact, Knight Sorrow had already seen through the Great Immortal Sword Art. He could have dodged it if he wanted to. However, he had seen through the Great Immortal Sword Art in an instant, and suddenly wanted to test its power. After all, although he was a lower divine king, the strength of his body and his understanding of the laws were not much weaker than Master Wanjian's. Even if his Great Immortal Sword Art was not as powerful as his opponent's, he could definitely put up a fight. You're courting death. Master Wanjian was completely enraged when he saw Knight Sorrow use the same move again. This time, he didn't hesitate at all and directly blasted his attack towards Yi Sorrow. Just in time. Let's test our true strength and see who's stronger. If it was purely for the sake of winning the bet, Knight Sorrow could have retreated at this moment, but he did not do so. Because fighting with Master Wanjian, who had great potential, was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He wanted to use this opportunity to improve his understanding of the battle between the sovereigns. This time it doesn't seem fake. How is this possible? He has only seen it twice, and he can imitate its essence. What kind of talent is this? Ancestor Phoenix and the others who were watching from the side were shocked. Even Supreme White Tiger was shocked when he saw Knight Sorrow's move clearly. Chapter 2871. Including the elusive City Lord. The White Tiger Sovereign had never seen anyone with Knight Sorrow's perception. Aside from the White Tiger Sovereign, the other sovereigns present all looked at Yi Shang in a different light. In Knight Sorrow's body, they saw a glimmer of hope that the God Realm no longer had. However, some of the sovereigns lamented that Knight Sorrow had appeared too late. There wasn't enough time for him to grow. Otherwise, as long as he became a sovereign, it would mean that the God Realm had the power to fight against sovereigns. Even if they were to compete with the top 100 sovereigns for fortune, they wouldn't be at a disadvantage. As for the 10,000 Sword Sect, his understanding of the Great Immortal Sword technique had already reached a certain level. When he saw Knight Sorrow use the Great Immortal Sword technique again, the first thing he wanted to do was curse. However, after a moment of observation, his heart was in turmoil. Although Knight Sorrow's move was an imitation of the Great Immortal Sword technique, it was in essence a Great Immortal Sword technique, and it wasn't weak at all. How can this be? How can this be? As he attacked Knight Sorrow, the Myriad Swords Master's heart couldn't calm down. The Great Immortal Sword Art was something he had spent an entire 800 years to gain a basic understanding of, and it had taken him roughly 20,000 years to completely grasp it. But now Knight Sorrow had actually been able to imitate it with just 2 glances. This dealt a heavy blow to his confidence. You're unstable. You're bound to lose. Before he clashed with the Myriad Swords Master, Knight Sorrow saw that the Myriad Swords Master's mind was unstable again. He calmly transmitted this message. The duel before them was an internal exchange of pointers. Although Knight Sorrow was full of fighting spirit, there wasn't a trace of killing intent in his heart. No. I won't lose. In fact, I'll kill you. When he heard Knight Sorrow's words, the Myriad Swords Master immediately recovered. As he roared, dense killing intent surged from his body. How can you want to kill when you're just exchanging pointers? How can you achieve great things with such an unstable mind? Seeing the Myriad Swords Master's reaction, Ancestor Phoenix and Ancestor Horn both frowned. In their opinion, a cultivator's strength wasn't the only thing that was important, but also their temperament. The 10,000 Swords Sect had lost their minds in the battle, and now they were bursting with such a strong murderous aura. This was very wrong. The Sword Sect. Winning or losing is important, but in front of so many supreme martial artists, you expose so many problems with your temperament. Uncle is very disappointed. The White Tiger Sovereign looked at the Myriad Sword Sect that was clashing with Knight Sorrow. He knew that even if the Myriad Sword Sect won today, it would be impossible to obtain the support of the majority of the Supremes. On the other hand, Knight Sorrow had already proven that he was a lower divine king who could fight against a ruler. Regardless of whether he won or lost, he would be nurtured with all his might. Even if he lost today and couldn't obtain the laws and essences of those invincible sovereigns, he would still be able to obtain other precious resources. Even if they had to force-feed Night Sorrow, the 9 Heavens Supremes would think of a way to raise his cultivation to the ruler realm as soon as possible. Boom. Just as the White Tiger Sovereign was sighing in his heart, Night Sorrow and the Myriad Sword sect had completely clashed. Both of their attacks were at the ruler realm. When they collided, the void was completely shattered. However, the Supremes had set up defenses around them, so the City Lord Manor itself wasn't damaged. What's the result? The Supremes present all knew that the battle before them had completely ended. Whether it was the Myriad Sword sect or Night Sorrow, neither of them had the ability to continue fighting. Ancestor Phoenix Sovereign used her divine sense to investigate, and found that the two of them were both standing in the void. Although they looked to be in a sorry state, neither of them had fallen. It was as if they were evenly matched. This is a little surprising. Could it be a draw? The other Supremes naturally also noticed the situation before them. Seeing that neither of them had fallen, the White Tiger Sovereign was a little more satisfied with his nephew. However, this time he didn't speak. Although he was very satisfied with his nephew, reason told him that Night Sorrow was the God Realm's territory's future. The current him at the lower Divine King Realm could already fight the Myriad Sword sect, who was an intermediate ruler. This completely proved his strength and potential. No matter how picky the Supremes were, they couldn't find a reason not to support Night Sorrow. At this thought, the White Tiger Sovereign said, Night Sorrow has won this battle. The Myriad Sword sect has the advantage in terms of cultivation realm. Those unrivaled rulers' laws and essences all belong to Night Sorrow. Since the White Tiger Sovereign had said so, the other Supremes obviously didn't have any objections. However, after the rulers spoke, Night Sorrow looked at the Myriad Sword sect and said, Our battle ends in a draw. We'll split those resources equally. If the God Realm wants to rise, it's not enough to rely on one person's efforts. Moreover, I have my own path to walk. No need. A loss is a loss. The Myriad Sword sect, who was standing in the void, was extremely surprised when he heard Night Sorrow's words. Because at this moment he no longer had the ability to move. As long as Night Sorrow continued to attack, the one who lost would be him. Before the battle, we valued victory and defeat. But now it doesn't matter. What's important is how we unite and help the God Realm overcome this crisis together. Night Sorrow knew that the Myriad Sword sect had lost to him, but he had already proved his and Supreme's foresight, so he didn't care about the so-called victory or defeat. Good. That's bold. The White Tiger Sovereign immediately cheered when he heard Night Sorrow's words. At the same time, if the Myriad Sword sect could obtain the resources of an unrivaled ruler, he would definitely be able to advance to an upper ruler. That would also be a considerable improvement. Moreover, if he absorbed and comprehended the unrivaled ruler's laws, his strength would also improve. As an uncle, he still thought of the Myriad Sword sect. However, the Myriad Sword sect suddenly said, A loss is a loss. I'm inferior to you. The unrivaled ruler's laws and essences all belong to you. He didn't want to accept this gift at all. In the Myriad Sword sect's eyes, this was Night Sorrow's charity. He didn't need it at all. When the Supremes saw that the Myriad Sword sect wasn't prepared to accept the unrivaled ruler's laws and essences, they were all astonished. But no one tried to persuade him otherwise. In their eyes, giving all the resources to Night Sorrow so that he could quickly increase his strength was the best outcome for the God Realm. At this time, Night Sorrow spoke up to persuade him. If nothing unexpected happens, we'll both participate in a certain battle 100 years from now. If you increase your strength, it'll help me and the God Realm. So, you have no reason or right to refuse. Chapter 2872. Since that's Night Sorrow's wish, then let's end this happily for everyone. This battle ends in a draw. The Myriad Sword sect and Night Sorrow will each receive half of the Sovereign's laws and essence, as well as half of the resources. Seeing that Night Sorrow was considering the problem from the perspective of the God Realm, Zhu Feng smiled. Nodding in satisfaction, he said, Myriad Sword sect, These resources are one of the foundations of the God realm. I hope you can cherish them well, and put all your efforts into increasing your strength and contributing to the God realm. As for your battle with Night Sorrow, it's just a display of your potential. Don't worry about it. Yes, the Sword Sect will remember the Sovereign's teachings. Originally, Myriad Sword Sect was extremely unwilling, thinking that Night Sorrow was fishing for fame. But soon, with the White Tiger Sovereign's reminder, he understood that Night Sorrow was truly standing from the perspective of the God realm. That was a kind of boldness, and he was instantly jolted awake. He had come out of his childhood to consider the problems from the perspective of his country. The two of you shake hands and make peace. This battle is over, and it's over. Seeing that Myriad Sword Sect didn't choose to rebel, the White Tiger Sovereign nodded in satisfaction. Then he called Night Sorrow and Myriad Sword Sect in front of him, and had them shake hands and make peace. Good. Night Sorrow will remember this. Night Sorrow said calmly as he shook hands with Myriad Sword Sect. At this moment, his state of mind had changed a little. He realized that the sovereigns of the God realm were clearly different from some of the sovereigns of the God realm. Although the White Tiger Sovereign leaned towards Myriad Sword Sect, after he revealed his talent, he didn't show any jealousy or dissatisfaction. Instead, he admired him from the bottom of his heart. It was obvious that these people were looking at things from the perspective of the entire God realm. No discord, no concord. From now on, Brother Yi, please guide me. At this time, Myriad Sword Sect had gradually walked out of the shadow of defeat. He didn't completely wallow in his failure and couldn't extricate himself. After all, the God realm was no longer like this. As the sovereigns who grew up in the God realm, they didn't have that kind of invincible spirit in their hearts that couldn't lose. Otherwise, Myriad Sword Sect wouldn't have lost his mind time and time again when fighting with Night Sorrow. Good. From now on, we'll be friends. We can interact more and exchange experiences or exchange pointers. Night Sorrow nodded politely. Good. The God realm's territory needs this kind of harmony. Supreme Ancestral Dragon said when he saw Night Sorrow shaking hands with the Myriad Sword Sect. The City Lord and the two Vice City Lords aren't here right now. Let's take out the resources for the two young geniuses. Black Tortoise Sovereign. What do you think? The White Tiger Supremacy and the Ancestral Phoenix Supremacy supported Night Sorrow and the Myriad Sword Sect respectively. They would definitely agree to immediately distribute the resources to the two of them. Therefore, the Ancestral Dragon Supremacy asked for the Black Tortoise Supremacy's opinion. The four of them had the highest status in the God Realm City. The other one with a slightly higher status was the Horn Clan's Sovereign. He was proficient in divination, and could often use his special ability to help the God Realm's territory avert danger. He was a very special existence. Even the matter of Night Sorrow becoming the Destiny's Child was divined by him. But normally, the Horn Clan's Sovereign didn't like to speak. Today, he said some words because he was a little excited about Night Sorrow's arrival. There's still 100 years until the War of Providence. This time, if the God Realm can't enter the top 1,000, the Providence won't be able to hold on. You two young geniuses must quickly increase your strength. There's no problem with giving you the resources, but you must understand one thing. That is, you're the hope of the entire God Realm. Sovereign Black Tortoise didn't answer Ancestral Sovereign Ancestor Dragon directly. Instead, he looked at Night Sorrow and Myriad Sword Sect and said, "But before I give you the resources, I have a question to ask. How many years have the two of you cultivated separately?" Sword Sect. It's been 2 eras. After Sovereign Black Tortoise asked, Myriad Sword Sect immediately replied. Then he looked at Night Sorrow like everyone else. Myriad Sword Sect cultivated for 2 eras to reach their current level. Their cultivation speed was even faster than some of the Supremes present. Logically speaking, there should be people talking. But at this moment, everyone's attention was on Night Sorrow. Obviously, in their hearts, Night Sorrow was the most important existence. Seeing everyone's attention on him, Night Sorrow thought for a moment and said, "Less than an era." In reality, he had cultivated for less than 10,000 years in the real world. This was considered to be leaving some face for Myriad Sword Sect. How long exactly? Cultivating to the Divine King realm with one opportunity isn't slow, but it's not that amazing. There aren't many such geniuses in the God realm, but there are countless of them in other realms. When Sovereign Black Tortoise heard Knight Sorrow's words, he immediately asked for the exact time. He felt that the other party was being a little careless. Not counting the cultivation in the spatial artifact, it should be around 3,000 to 4,000 years. Knight Sorrow didn't pay much attention. Knight Sorrow told the truth. He only gave a rough estimate based on his impression, and didn't calculate it accurately. What? Cultivating for 3,000 to 4,000 years in the lower realm. And you've reached your current level? Amazing, really amazing. In time, even the Eternal Supreme Realm will spread your name. The Black Tortoise Supremacy, who had originally had a grave expression on his face, smiled when he heard Yishang's answer. Then he said, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and take out those resources and give them to them." According to Knight Sorrow's cultivation time, 100 years isn't a short time for him. He can definitely make good use of it. In the battle for Providence 100 years later, we still need him to take the lead. We must spare no effort to provide resources. That's right. When Sovereign Ancestral Dragon heard Knight Sorrow's cultivation time, he was also pleasantly surprised. He knew that as long as the God realm passed through the current crisis of Providence, it wouldn't be too difficult to continue for thousands or tens of thousands of years. As long as Knight Sorrow was given a few tens of thousands of years, he might be able to become a supreme. With his talent, he might even surpass the City Lord of the God realm. Here are the resources that both of you deserve. Keep them well. Sovereign Ancestral Dragon, Sovereign Black Tortoise, Sovereign Ancestral Phoenix, and Sovereign White Tiger took out the resources and divided them into 2 equal portions, giving one each to Knight Sorrow and Myriad Sword Sect. When they handed the items to Knight Sorrow, Sovereign White Tiger patted Knight Sorrow's shoulder and said, "Later, I will instruct my subordinates to prepare a house for you in the City Lord's mansion. You can rule the City Lord's mansion on normal days. If you have any questions about cultivation, you can ask us at any time. Every year, we will gather in the City Lord's mansion." Thank you, Sovereign White Tiger. Chapter 2873. Haha. Knight Sorrow, if you want to understand the situation of the Eternal Supremes, you don't need to read those books. The White Tiger Sovereign smiled when he heard Yishang, and then he looked at the Myriad Sword Sect and said, "Sword Sect, show Yishang around and familiarize him with the cities of the God world. Moreover, explain the specific situation of the Eternal Supreme Dimension to him." Yes, Lord Supreme. In front of everyone, Myriad Sword Sect did not address the White Tiger Sovereign as uncle. He then looked at Knight Sorrow and said, "Brother Yi, if you don't mind, you can walk around the city with me." "Brother Wan, what are you saying? Let's go." Knight Sorrow bid farewell to the Supremes, then followed the 10,000 Sword Sect out of the City Lord's mansion. As soon as they walked out of the mansion, Knight Sorrow asked, "Brother Wan, other than the Celestial Realm, what else is there in the Celestial Realm? Although the situation is grim, there shouldn't be only one city left, right?" "Haha, that's not the case." Myriad Sword Sect shook his head. The Celestial Realm has its own territory, just like the other territories. Other than the Celestial Realm, there are tens of millions of miles of jurisdiction. The place we are in is a safe zone, while most of the other areas are filled with danger. Outside the safe zone, there are many sovereigns and supremes fighting. The sovereigns and supremes who are fighting are rotated. Aren't there people from other territories attacking the Celestial Realm? Knight Sorrow asked as they walked on the empty streets of the Celestial Realm. He had heard about the Celestial Realm situation from the Ancestral Phoenix, but he did not know much about it. There are people from other realms attacking. They are a great threat, but as long as the destiny of the Celestial Realm is not destroyed, it will be protected by the Eternal Supremes. Although they will attack the safe zone and suffer divine punishment, they won't really destroy the Celestial Realm. At this point, the 10,000 Sword Sect sighed and continued, "But if that sliver of fortune in our territory is destroyed, the surrounding territories will definitely destroy our territory and invade the God Realm behind us. As for the ones attacking the God Realm's safe zone, It's not just the people from other territories, but also the natives of the Eternal Supreme Realm. They don't have much intelligence, but they are extremely powerful. Without the strength of a sovereign, it's impossible to deal with them. So that's how it is. It seems like we really need to do our best to plunder the Celestial Realm's providence in 100 years. Night Sorrow had originally thought that luck was a mysterious thing, but now that it involved the protection of the Eternal Supreme World, he immediately realized the seriousness of the matter and took it seriously. Night Sorrow then asked curiously, "Brother Juan, where did you grow up? Was it also the God Realm? But I don't think I've heard anything about you in the God Realm." The Supreme Beings were basically all great figures from 3,000 reincarnations ago. Those were all things that happened in the distant past, so it was normal that they hadn't heard of them. However, the 10,000 Swords sect had personally said that he had risen to power in the last 2 eras, which made Night Sorrow very curious. I was born in the deity realm, but I've been cultivating in the Eternal Supreme Realm." The 10,000 Swords sect smiled and explained. At that time, there were a total of 300 genius seedlings who were brought from the God Realm to the Eternal Supreme Realm by the ancestor Phoenix Supreme. After arriving at the Eternal Supreme Realm, we have been cultivating in the God Realm until we reached the sovereign level. Only then could we come out. I'm the 11th to reach the sovereign level. Now there are a total of 19 people who have reached the sovereign level. However, in the battle outside the safe zone, 12 of us have fallen. Only 7 of us are left. So that's how it is. It seems that the Supreme Beings have really put in a lot of effort for the God Realm's territory. You genius seedlings really don't have it easy. Cultivating in seclusion all the time, if one's mind is weak, I'm afraid he won't be able to persevere. Night Sorrow sighed. If he had been forced to cultivate in a secluded area all the time, he would probably have gone crazy from the stifling. It's a little depressing, yes. But our achievements are much greater than staying in the God Realm. If we hadn't come to the Eternal Supreme Realm, I'm afraid none of us would have reached the sovereign level in such a short time. After all, you know how difficult it is to become a sovereign in the God Realm. The 10,000 Swords sect said indifferently. Obviously, he was very happy that he had been chosen. Just as he said, if the White Tiger Sovereign hadn't brought him to the Eternal Supreme Realm, with his potential, he would have achieved something in the God Realm, but at most he would be a divine king. At this point, the 10,000 Swords sect said with sincere admiration, "Brother Ye's potential is still the highest. It only took you a few thousand years to become a divine king in the God Realm. If you had been brought to the Eternal Supreme Realm, you would have become a sovereign long ago." Haha, I'm guessing that when the Supreme Beings were choosing, I was still in the realms below the God Realm. My path of growth has always been accompanied by resistance and slaughter. Night Sorrow smiled as he told his story. After listening to Night Sorrow's story from beginning to end, the 10,000 Swords sect revealed an expression of longing. He said enviously, "Brother Ye's path of cultivation is brilliant and varied. In comparison, people like us still lack some experience. When I fought with you, I realized that I wasn't decisive enough in a moment of life and death. This is one of my weaknesses. After hearing about Brother Juan's experience, I can understand why you weren't decisive enough in battle. You still lack the baptism of life and death battles." It was only now that Night Sorrow understood that the 10,000 Swords sect and the others were sovereigns who had been force-fed. Their actual combat experience was pitifully low. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made such a low-level mistake in battle. After thinking for a moment, Night Sorrow continued, "If it's possible, can we go to the border of the safe zone to train?" "Of course we can. Most of the resources we normally obtain are from the savage sovereigns outside the safe zone." The 10,000 Swords sect said. Master 10,000 Swords sighed. "But we only have 100 years before we have to participate in the War of Providence. Using 100 years to absorb the precepts of those invincible sovereigns would be very difficult." "That's true. After we familiarize ourselves with the God Realm cities, we should immediately start cultivating. If possible, even if we can't absorb all of it, we should set aside 30 years for battle. What do you think?" Night Sorrow looked at the 10,000 Swords sect and made an agreement. Without absorbing the natural laws and essence of the invincible sovereigns, it was impossible to directly fight. Alright. There's no time to lose. Let's immediately return to our base and cultivate. In the eternal supreme world, the natural laws of time are extremely stable. Even the city lord's mansion only has a spatial paradise that accelerates time by 3 times. Thus 100 years here can at most be 300 years. Let's make good use of this opportunity and increase our strength as much as possible. After making an agreement with Night Sorrow, the 10,000 Swords sect explained a few other things about the eternal supreme world to him before sending him back to the city lord's mansion. Then they returned to the tavern where the others were. Chapter 2874. When the people in the restaurant heard the Myriad Swords sect mention Night Sorrow, their faces were filled with disbelief. After all, they had clearly seen Night Sorrow's cultivation. It was only at the level of the Divine King. That was something that couldn't be faked. Perhaps he really can help us get out of this predicament. The Myriad Swords sect took a sip of cold wine and sighed. When he thought of everything that had happened to Night Sorrow, he felt somewhat defeated. He was already an intermediate dominator, but he had been defeated by Night Sorrow, a lesser divine king. There was no way he would be able to contend against him in the future. When the other sovereigns heard the Myriad Sword sect's words, they also realized that Night Sorrow was different from the rest. They began to discuss matters outside the safe zone, as well as the future prospects of the heavenly realm. As for Night Sorrow, after returning to the City Lord's manor, he sought out the Ancestor Phoenix, as well as Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei. Night Sorrow immediately gave them a portion of the unrivaled Dominator's laws and essence he had obtained. However, Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei knew what this meant, so they didn't accept Night Sorrow's gift. Night Sorrow, if you're thinking about them, hurry up and increase your strength. Go outside the safe zone and hunt down the Dominator-level desolate beasts. Bring back the laws and essence they contain. That's the most common way to increase one's strength in the eternal supreme realm. Seeing that Night Sorrow was about to give up the unrivaled Dominator's laws and essence, the Ancestor Phoenix's expression became somewhat unnatural. He reminded Night Sorrow of this. Night Sorrow knew what the Ancestor Phoenix meant. He nodded and said, Night Sorrow will cultivate as quickly as possible and try to increase my strength a bit more. Then, I'll head outside the safe zone to hunt down desolate beasts. In his conversation with the Myriad Sword sect, Night Sorrow had already learned that desolate beasts were native to the Eternal Supreme Realm. Like the natives, they were extremely powerful and bloodthirsty. However, most of them lived alone, so they were easier to deal with than the primitive tribes. Night Sorrow, I know that you are responsible and you want to obtain cultivation resources for your family and friends who don't have the means to obtain resources. However, you must remember that the Eternal Supreme Realm's danger is incomparable to the Heavenly Realm. The living beings here were mostly at the Sovereign Realm, or the Supreme Realm. There were even some immature young beasts that were at the Divine King Realm. Therefore, it's extremely dangerous to go hunting. Ancestor Phoenix described the dangers of eternal supremacy to Night Sorrow, then said, As the saying goes, the son of 1,000 gold coins can't just sit and wait. Right now, you are the hope of the entire God realm. You must take care of yourself. The Eternal Supreme World's natural laws, space, and time were all extremely stable. At the same time, it contained a large number of natural treasures. However, it did not contain much divine essence. If one wanted to increase their strength quickly, they could first obtain resources from desolate beasts. Secondly, they could search for natural treasures. Ancestor Phoenix knew that Yishang would not watch his family's strength stagnate. Therefore, he would definitely leave the safe zone and hunt in the dangerous areas of the celestial realm. Lord Supreme Martial Artist, Yishang will remember your words. But there are things that men can and cannot do. Yishang must first support his own small family, before he can support a large family like the God realm. Hearing Night Sorrow's words, although Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei did not want him to take the risk, they were still very touched. The most important thing for a man was to be able to shoulder the responsibility on his shoulders. Night Sorrow was obviously such a person. He would not let anyone around him down. Night Sorrow did not pay attention to the expressions of the two women. He cupped his fists towards the Ancestor Phoenix and asked, Lord Supreme, I heard from Brother One that there is a 3 times acceleration space in the City Lord's mansion. Night Sorrow wants to cultivate in it. I wonder if that's possible? 3 times acceleration space is one of the most precious treasures of the City Lord's mansion. If ordinary people want to use it, they have to pay eternal crystals. But you are everyone's hope, so you don't have to pay. Wait here, I will help you apply for the qualifications to enter. After Supreme Phoenix said this, he turned around and left to discuss Night Sorrow's use of the accelerated space with the other Supremes. At this time, Jingyan said, Husband, in fact, you don't need to think so much about us. Lord Supreme just told us that if we pass the assessment, we can join the Heavenly Realm's genius base to cultivate. As long as we join, we can obtain unlimited resources until we reach the Sovereign Realm. That's right, Night Sorrow. You don't need to spend too much energy on us. After all, you have enough responsibilities. Wu Lingfei also said, Although the two of us are not as talented as you, it shouldn't be a problem for us to enter the genius base. You don't need to worry too much. But I've heard that unless one cultivates to the Sovereign Realm, it's impossible to leave that place. I can't bear to let you lose your freedom. When the two said this, Night Sorrow understood that they were preparing to enter the genius base that nurtured the Myriad Sword sect. Recalling some of the words of the Myriad Sword sect, Night Sorrow felt that although he could improve his strength there were too many restrictions. His family didn't need to be trapped there. If they wanted resources, he could go and obtain them. Seeing that Night Sorrow didn't quite agree, Jing Yun was a little unhappy. Husband, Aunt Fei and I have our own ideas. We don't want to be a burden to you. Can you understand this? You always carry all the responsibilities on your shoulders. It's too tiring. Yes. Night Sorrow, we don't want you to work too hard. Moreover, you're busy increasing your strength. Even if you obtain resources, it's best if you use them yourself. Giving them to us is a waste of resources. If we use the resources you snatch to increase our strength, our mentality will be unstable. Wu Lingfei also explained. She and Jing Yin didn't want to take up precious time. Alright. I won't force you on this matter. If you want to, you can try it with Fire Phoenix King and the others. Yishang thought for a moment, and indeed understood the two women's mentality. If it were him, he would probably make the same choice. After Supreme Ancestor Phoenix returned, Night Sorrow told him about Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei's choice. Hearing this, Supreme Ancestor Phoenix immediately had a whole new level of respect for Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei. He nodded approvingly and said, Night Sorrow, go and cultivate well. I will take good care of them and Fire Phoenix King and the others. Let them enter the genius base successfully. Good. Supreme Ancestor Phoenix, Night Sorrow will quickly increase my strength and strive to reach the Sovereign Realm as soon as possible. After settling the matter of Jing Yin and Wu Lingfei, Night Sorrow finally had the mood to enter the City Lord's residence's cultivation space. He cultivated without any distracting thoughts. Chapter 2875. The laws and essence of these invincible sovereigns were thousands of times stronger than sovereign moxies. This was the first time he'd ever seen such pure energy. It was far superior to God Veins. It was a supreme cultivation treasure. Although he wasn't sure what level he'd reach if he absorbed all of these resources, Night Sorrow was confident that he'd be able to reach the intermediate Divine King level at the very least. Furthermore, this breakthrough was similar to breaking through to the Sovereign Realm. It would be a huge improvement. The wills contained within these laws and essences have already been removed by the autarchs. I can just absorb them directly. It seems like I won't need 70 years in the real world. After settling his emotions, Night Sorrow found a quiet room and set up a formation. Then he began to peacefully absorb the laws and essences of these invincible sovereigns. He sat there for 120 years. On the 120th year, Night Sorrow suddenly opened his eyes. He'd successfully broken through to the intermediate Divine King level, and was about to face his tribulation. After overcoming the tribulation, Night Sorrow once more began to absorb the resources in front of him. At this point, only a third of the laws and essences of the invincible races remained. Night Sorrow used 30 years to absorb them all. This time, however, he didn't experience any increase in cultivation level. Roughly 50 years had passed in the outside world. As soon as Night Sorrow emerged from seclusion, he immediately contacted Ancestor Phoenix and asked about Jing Yun, Wu Lingfei, and the others. He learned that they'd already entered the genius base and couldn't be seen for the time being. Night Sorrow went straight to the Myriad Sword Sect. When he arrived, he found that the Myriad Sword Sect was still in seclusion. 3 sovereigns were standing guard for him. When they saw Night Sorrow, the 3 sovereigns' eyes lit up. Are you the child of destiny, Night Sorrow? This one is indeed Night Sorrow, but I don't deserve the title of child of destiny. Night Sorrow could sense that they didn't have any ill intentions. He immediately responded, then asked, How should I address you? Are you all Brother Wan's friends? We all cultivated together in the genius base. My name is Xue Changtian, this is Yuan Feng Xue, he is Morong Jinlu. The sovereign with a long sword on his back introduced the only female cultivator present, and the other sovereign with a folding fan to Night Sorrow with a smile on his face. Nice to meet you, nice to meet you. After Xue Changtian introduced him, Morong Zijin, who was holding a folding fan, immediately bowed to Yishang. He was dressed in a white robe and didn't look like a cultivator. Instead, he looked more like a graceful scholar. The female cultivator, Yuan Fengxue, was dressed in a red robe. She didn't have any weapons in her hands. She also greeted Night Sorrow with a smile. The 3 of them were in awe of the Myriad Sword Sect. After hearing about Night Sorrow from him, he immediately felt admiration for him. He completely retracted his previous thoughts of looking down on the Divine King. Everyone, how long will it take for Brother Wan to come out of seclusion? Night Sorrow exchanged pleasantries with the 3, then asked about the Myriad Sword Sect's situation. His strength had risen to the level of the mid-level Divine King. He wanted to immediately head out of the safe zone and test his strength. He also wanted to find some suitable materials to forge a divine weapon similar to the Samsara halberd. After all, he'd always used the spear as his weapon. It was a good weapon. At the same time, he wanted to forge a suitable bow. When he used the Tianyan bow, Night Sorrow discovered that the combination of a bow and a spear, 1 long-range and 1 close-range divine weapons, was quite suitable. Brother Wan shouldn't be able to absorb all the resources in a short period of time. He told us to call him out in 60 years. 50 years have already passed, so there are still 10 years left. Xue Changtian explained to Night Sorrow. The 3 of you have been guarding this place for 50 years. Night Sorrow was surprised to hear Xue Changtian's words. He felt that there shouldn't be any danger in the God realm. There shouldn't be a need for 3 people to guard this place. Brother Yi, you've been cultivating in the City Lord's manor, so you don't know the dangers outside. As the saying goes, all the hustle and bustle of the world is for profit. The news of Brother Wan obtaining the law of invincible sovereign has already spread through the city. It's inevitable that he'll be targeted by some people with bad intentions. Although the territories of the divine realm appear to be harmonious, there are still some dark sides in the dark. Xue Changtian patiently explained to Night Sorrow. He also told Night Sorrow that although some cultivators in the God realm didn't dare to act against their own people on the surface, there were many who would do such things behind the scenes. Some people would immediately turn hostile for resources. So there are people like this. It seems that the most unpredictable thing is the human heart. When Night Sorrow heard this, he immediately began to worry about Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei's situation. He looked at Yuan Fengxue. Senior Sister Yuan, is it convenient for female cultivators to cultivate in the genius base? You have a female friend who has entered the genius base to cultivate? Yuan Fengxue, who had been somewhat absent-minded, immediately locked her gaze on Night Sorrow's face. Yes, my wife, another family member and 3 other friends have entered the genius base. Night Sorrow spoke truthfully. With the help of Ancestor Phoenix, Jing Yun, Wu Lingfei, Fire Phoenix Monarch, and Dragon Sparrow Monarch had all entered the genius base to cultivate. What kind of strength do they have? Can they sweep through the ranks of the Divine King? Yuan Fengxue didn't mention the rules of the genius base. Instead, she asked about Jing Yun and the other's strength. It's impossible for them to sweep through the ranks of the Divine King. However, although 2 of my family members are lower Divine Kings, their talents are quite good. They're close to Ancestor Phoenixes. As for the other 3 friends, they have the strength of High God Kings. Yishang didn't hide anything when he talked about the strength of Jing Yun and the others. In the genius base, it's not necessarily a good thing for a woman to have good talent. Yuan Fengxue sighed and said, because those who enter the genius base can't leave until they reach the ruler level. Some people have stayed there for too long, and can't see any hope of reaching the ruler level. Over time, their mentality will become unbalanced. You're saying that my 2 family members might be targeted by some people? Although Yuan Fengxue's words were very reserved, Night Sorrow could understand the meaning behind them and asked excitedly. Yes. Some people can't break through to the ruler level, so they'll think of evil ways such as dual cultivating with talented women. Yuan Fengxue frowned. Back in the genius base, she had been taken care of by the Myriad Sword sect. That was why she hadn't been taken over by evil cultivators. Won't the Supremes ask about these things? Night Sorrow, who was worried about Jing Yun and Wu Lingfei, asked unhappily. The genius base has its own rules. After entering, you have to rely on yourself. The Supremes can't act as they please. Yuan Fengxue explained on behalf of the Supremes. In truth, the number of geniuses in the God realm is already extremely low. If there wasn't a catfish effect, many people in the genius base would slack off. What she said made sense, but Night Sorrow didn't feel good when he heard it. He cupped his fists at the 3 and said, "You guys continue to protect Brother Wan. I'll go take a look at the genius base and return soon." You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.